Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Had a DNA Quirk? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Chapter 1. Meet the Family. Yoichi knew that he had placed One for All in safe hands with Okada and Endo. Yoichi was certain that the two vigilantes were trustworthy and that they would cultivate power enough to defeat his older brother. He had given them specific instructions to not go out looking to fight All for One and to keep a low profile to not draw suspicion. Yoichi himself would be escaping to a countryside town and changing his name, as well as using a fake ID to secure himself a job that would allow him to keep an untraceable lifestyle. Fortunately, his quirk, transference, allowed him to not only pass on his traits via DNA consumption, but he discovered that he also could gain someone else's traits, e.g. hair color, eye color, etc. You would think this would be a massive disadvantage. It is very illegal to just go around eating people for DNA, but Yoichi had a secret weapon. This wasn't really a weapon as it was more like a weakness with one benefit: Yoichi was anemic. This meant that he was eligible for blood transplants from a national charity. This also meant he could easily harvest DNA without becoming a local menace. This was hard for Yoichi as he felt like he was putting these people in danger, but he had to follow through to escape his older brother. It had been a few hours since the transfusion had taken place and Yoichi was appraising his new form. He had originally had white hair, pale skin and green eyes. Now he had chocolate brown hair and lightly tan skin, although he still had his piercing green eyes. Exhaling, Yoichi stared at himself in the mirror of the motel he was staying at. So far, he was around about 300 miles from where his brother had held him and only about 70 miles from his new home. Hopefully, he can blend in and not get tracked down by his brother's criminal army and settle down. Tomorrow, Yoichi Shigaraki will become Yoichi Midoriya. Over 100 years later, Izuku Midoriya, an older junior high student, was currently sitting in class, not really, listening to his teacher babble on and on about making life-changing decisions and that this was the most defining choice of their life. He was just talking out of his but though, as within seconds of finishing his lecture he threw all of the desired course forms, saying, "There's no point in me handing these out, I know that you all want to go the hero route." This caused the whole class, -2, to erupt into cheers, all activating their quirks. Izuku just put his head on his desk and covered his face with his arms. "Hey teach, don't lump me in with the rest of these extras," Katsuki, Kaken, Bakugo started. These guys would be lucky to become sidekicks to some D-lister. The class then began targeting Bakugo for their insults. "You aren't better than us," one girl shouted. "Yeah, we have the same chances as you," another boy argued. "You're applying for UA Bakugo?" the teacher asked nonchalantly, subsequently silencing the class. Murmurs spread throughout the class. "Doesn't that school have a 0.03% acceptance rate? I heard it was in the top 5 best hero schools in the world," the students whispered. Bakugo then leapt from his chair, landed on his desk and flashed a cocky grin. "I'm gonna be the next #1 hero. I'm gonna surpass All Might and become a rich and famous hero." The rest of the class sat in awe at Katsuki's confidence. "I aced all the mock exams and I'm gonna be the only one from this shitty school to get into UA. Oh, Midoriya, you're applying for UA too, right?" Silence. "Wah! Midoriya a hero." The class howled. "He doesn't even have a quirk." One girl snickered. Actually, they abolished that rule, so I can still try." Izuku just wanted the world to swallow him whole. The teacher didn't even bother to defend him. Izuku then heard a voice which shook him to his core. "Deku!" Katsuki growled like a rabid dog. "What the F are you playing at? Are you looking down on me?" No, Kaken. I just don't see the harm in trying." Izuku pleaded, trying to quell his former friend's rage. "It has been my DD dream since I was little, you know." Izuku stammered. Bakugo let off a small explosion on Izuku's desk, blasting him back enough to knock him off his chair. Katsuki loomed over Izuku's fallen form, explosions crackling in his palms. At this point, the teacher decided to begin the lesson and ordered both boys back to their seats. Izuku was hastily collecting his things and stuffing them into his backpack, afraid of what might happen if caught. Kaken had seemed extra annoyed today, and after what had happened in homeroom today he wasn't taking any chances. But, unfortunately for him, fate had other plans. While he was rushing to grab his quirk analysis for the future number 13, he began taking notes on different heroes and specifically on their quirks. Bakugo quickly snatched the notebook from him. "What's this, your diary?" He sneered. "Ha! Good one, Bakugo," one of his cronies chuckled from behind him. Katsuki flipped through the book, stopping every once in a while to examine a diagram. Izuku decided to speak up for once as this was one of his precious notebooks. "See, come on, Kaken, you've had your fun, just give it back," Izuku shakily asked, his stutter once again breaking through as he reached out to grab the notebook. Bakugo quickly maneuvered the book away from Izuku, being both taller and stronger. "Are you trying to boss me around, Deku?" Bakugo snarled with anger dripping from his voice and causing Izuku to immediately backpedal and apologize. "And no, Kaken, that's not what I meant to do at all. It was just because I put a lot of time and effort into those notes, and it would be a shame if they got to Majedni way and I not insinuatig Thaudio Woodadel Beautifio your Quirquentoff Biaxi dash," and Izuku had gone off onto another mutter storm. He really needed to break out of that habit. As Izuku was off muttering about who knows what, Katsuki had gotten bored of Izuku's Little Hero FTSH booklet and his muttering was starting to annoy him. The blonde boy's twisted mind decided to teach the quirkless freak a lesson for wasting his time. Without a word, he raised Izuku's notebook between his palms and set off an explosion, turning the notebook into a charred piece of rubbish. "Listen, Deku, sorry to visit on your birthday cake, but you aren't becoming a hero, Katsuki ranted to Izuku, who wasn't really listening to him, still spiraling from the destruction of his best notebook to date. "Just give up and withdraw your application to UA. Call me a perfectionist, but I don't want you dirtying the halls of my future school," Katsuki stated as he launched the verdette's notebook into the koi pond below, causing him to give a terrified squeak. "Oh, and Deku, I know a way for you to get a quirk," he stated with his back turned to Izuku. "Jump off the school's roof and pray for a quirk in your next life." Izuku's mind instantly halted all trains of thought. The world went still and silent. Izuku couldn't believe his ears. He knew him and Bakugo's friendship had been strained the past few years, but that comment had truly opened Izuku's eyes. Katsuki Bakugo wasn't his friend. Izuku walked down the stairs and off of the school campus, giving up on the notebook and seeing it as too damaged to be repaired. He felt numb, his legs on autopilot and taking him wherever they pleased, but Izuku was too busy thinking to pay attention to his surroundings. How could he say that? He says he wants to be a hero, yet he says those things. Izuku thought to himself. What if I did jump? He would be charged for suicide baiting me and could never go to a hero school. He continued this train of thought until he finally concluded. Still unaware of his surroundings. "Alright, I'm going to be someone who stands up for people like me, the weak," he valiantly thought. "I will protect them and be a herd dash." Those were the last words he thought before a copious amount of sludge completely engulfed him. As Izuku thrashed about, trying to free himself from the vile substance, he heard a seedy voice say, "Sorry kid, but I need your body, we don't want him finding me. You were here at the perfect time. Believe me when I say, you're my hero." The mass seemed to chuckle to itself as it forced its way down his throat, giving him no opportunities to breathe. Izuku was finding it hard to stay conscious as he lost even more oxygen to the foul-tasting monster who was clogging his windpipe and was losing the strength to actively fight back. Suddenly, he felt an electric feeling all over his body and suddenly started to fade even faster. The last thing the boy saw was a large man with blonde hair winding up a punch towards the villain. And then it all went black. Izuku was awoken from his slumber by a light tapping on his cheek. Again and again, the hand would tap his face. Until Izuku remembered the situation he had been in before he fell unconscious. His eyes shot open, and Izuku practically had a heart attack when he saw that the symbol of peace, All Might, was standing no less than 3 meters from him. Izuku immediately scrambled around for his notebook and then remembered he had left it in the koi pond, which saddened him. "Haha," All Might laughed. "I'm glad to see you are all right, my boy. I was getting a bit worried you were no longer with us. He spoke with a cheerful tone, which didn't match the morbid sentence he had just said. Thank you for saving me, All Might. Izuku said with all the excitement of a child who had just been given free rein of a candy store. It is all in a day's work, my boy. All Might heartily said. But I must be off now, duty calls. He laughed as he launched off into the sky. Izuku just stared after him in awe. Izuku was suddenly hit with a wave of fatigue that he had failed to notice beforehand. He looked at the time on his phone and called his mom to explain about why he was late. As he continued onwards towards his home, Izuku had begun to think about a training regiment to get him ready for the UA entrance exams. As he walked, he noticed the local trash heap, Takoba Municipal Beach Park. It had once been an amazing beach that boasted some of the best views in all of Japan. Unfortunately, the tide naturally brought garbage from the ocean and dragged it to Takoba Beach. As the trash began to pile up and up, the local deviants realized they had an easier time fly tipping on the beach, and they did. By now the beach had just become a giant trash heap, which was confusing as there was an actual waste disposal center only about 3 miles from the beach. That was when a bulb lit up in Izuku's head. As his training, Izuku would clear the beach. It would help Izuku grow stronger by working out different muscle groups. It was local and free. The Midoriyas weren't poor, but they weren't too well off either. And most of all, it was a heroic act and helped out his local community, bringing him a step closer to reaching his goal of becoming a hero. Izuku had made up his mind that every day after school he would go work out at the beach. It wasn't the most conventional means of working out, but he was determined to make it work. This was his first step towards becoming a hero. Izuku tried to sneak into his house, but unfortunately, the squeaky front door immediately alerted his mom of his presence. Izuku, where were you? I called you 8 times and you didn't answer once. She wailed, tears in her eye. Sorry Mom, I got held up by a villain attack. Izuku didn't like lying to his mom, but she would probably have an aneurysm if he told her when she was unprepared. Oh well, that's fine. I know those can get quite hectic, his mother calmly said, nearly giving Izuku whiplash with the 180 in attitude. Your dinner is in the refrigerator, you can heat it in the microwave. Okay Mom, Izuku said, I'm feeling kinda tired, so I think I'm just gonna go to bed. Okay sweetie, I won't be in by the time you wake up and I need you to pick up some groceries, so I'll write a list of what I need you to get before I get home. His mother told him as he made his way to his room. Pulling over a pen and notepad with her quirk and quickly scrawled down a list of things to buy, placing the note on the table and retreating to the living room after wishing her son good night. Izuku sluggishly dragged himself to his room, dragging his feet as he did so. He didn't know if it was the near-death experience or adrenaline in the moment, but he was far too tired to care. He just wanted to get to his bed as soon as possible. Izuku didn't bother changing out of his clothes or covering himself with a blanket. As soon as his head hit the pillow, he was out cold. Izuku awoke in a cold, sweaty heap, gasping for air after having a strange dream. As he looked outside, he noticed that the sky was still stained in a light pink shade. He checked his alarm clock, which read 6:04 a.m. The boy lowered himself back into bed. He had a few hours to kill until his mom returned home from work and decided to allow himself some rest as it was the weekend. Or at least he would have done it if it wasn't for the fact each time he fell back asleep his mind was flooded with images of a dark-haired man and 3 glowing orbs, one larger and white while the other 2 were smaller, one swampy green in color whereas the other was a pale red. Izuku defeatedly climbed out of bed after 10 minutes of this and changed out of his uniform and into his t-shirt, and some shorts. After showering, that sludge really got everywhere, and brushing his teeth, Izuku made his way into the kitchen and made himself a drink and grabbed an apple. Taking a huge chomp out of his apple, he strolled over to the table and sat down to read about recent hero events on Hero News. Setting down his glass, Izuku continued to happily scroll through the different news while eating his apple. After finishing his news article, the verdette's gaze wandered the room. With nothing better to do, he recalled the different items: the microwave, the TV, the list of groceries he had to buy before Mom got home, a spada weight, the list of groceries he had to get before Mom got home. He quickly grabbed the list, hastily standing up. As Izuku stood up, his elbow smacked into his glass of water, knocking it off the table. His mind went into hyperdrive as he saw the glass falling as if in slow motion. He reached out his hand to try and grab the glass in a vain attempt to try and catch it. He feared his mother's reaction to the sight. Inko Midoriya was a soft-spoken and well-mannered woman, but messing with her fur nature was a surefire way to incur her wrath, something Izuku was quite unhappy to do. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Izuku felt an odd pulsing sensation at his palm. Focusing on that feeling, a burst of slime shot out of Izuku's hand, wrapped around the cup and receded into his body, bringing the cup to his hand. Izuku stood there completely stunned. He had a quirk. Izuku pinched himself on the hand to make sure he wasn't dreaming. He wasn't dreaming. Izuku immediately sprung into action, placing the cup back onto the table and then texting his mother of the occurrence, his smile spreading even further when she said she was booking an appointment for a Quirk evaluation immediately and that they would be going straight after she finished her shift. The boy's excitement to use his quirk was overwhelming, yet he stayed strong to not accidentally hurt himself while using it. He went to collect the money from his wallet and picked up the list of things he needed to buy. Going over to the door, he put on his shoes and opened the door, stepping out into the outside world on a hunt for groceries. As Izuku and Inko sat in the waiting room of the Quirk clinic, Izuku couldn't help but notice the strange glances that he seemed to be getting from the other children's parents. Sure, it was justified. It wasn't every day you saw a 14-year-old sitting in a hospital full of 4-year-olds, but they didn't have to be weird about it. He was there for the same thing as everyone else. Speaking of Midoriya Izuku, we have a QT for a Midoriya Izuku. The nurse called out, making her way over to the play area to search for him. Unfortunately, Izuku was over half a decade too old to be playing in there, and he had to go inform the nurse that he was in fact nearly in high school. Hello, I'm Dr. Kirishima. I will be your quirk doctor from now on, as unfortunately Dr. Tsubasa left quite recently. The doctor introduced herself. Izuku noticed her sharp teeth as she spoke. How about we get started? Can you tell me how your quirk manifested, what it felt like, and if there were any signs that it could have been about to manifest beforehand? The beratement of questions left Izuku stunned, not having much social interaction aside from his mother. Well, when it first activated, I was trying to catch a glass of water that I knocked over when I felt this pulsing in my hands. He paused, thinking of how he could best describe the slime. Then it was like this slime just shot out of my palm. It wrapped around the glass then, like, Siki back in. Interesting, and your quirk is telekinesis? She asked, adopting an inquisitive look. Yes. My quirk allows me to attract small objects towards me, and his father's quirk allows him to breathe fire, Inko explained. Alright, Izuku, I'm going to need a blood sample to determine the mutation in the quirk gene. The doctor scribbled down on her clipboard. I didn't need one last time I came. Izuku thought aloud. What? Dr. Kirishima asked, a flabbergasted look on her face. Well, all Dr. Tsubasa did was x-ray my foot and tell me I'm quirkless. Was he supposed to? Ping his head in confusion. Sigh, he was meant to do a blood test to determine your quirk factor. She chided. Okay, I'm going to run a QFD on your blood as well as a quirk gene analysis. I will also be writing a report against Dr. Tsubasa, as this is a serious health risk if your quirk was dangerous. She turned to her computer and began rapidly typing. Swiveling back to the green-haired duo, an annoyed tinge in her voice. Alright, moving on, did you have any odd occurrences before your quirk? I hadn't done much because I had just woken up, but... Izuku searched his mind for every smallest detail of the morning before he found one oddity. I had been having the same dream over and over again when I tried to go back to sleep, Izuku began. But it wasn't like a normal dream. There was this man with black hair, and he also had these piercing green eyes. There were also these glowing balls. There were 3 of them, one larger than the other 2. The larger one was a swirling white, and one of the smaller ones had a pale red color to it with lightning slightly crackling around it. The other one was mossy green, and it also swirled, but it was a more liquidy texture? I can't describe it any other way. He finished his brain spill, taking a gulp of air. These are some interesting observations, but I think using these samples we can find out the true nature of your quirk, she said hopefully. If your quirk had come in at the normal time, I would have just recommended that you practice it at kindergarten, but you are 14 years old and can't practice it at school without getting detention, so I will recommend you go to a quirk gym at least twice a week. The memberships for minors is less to help hero hopefuls train up their quirks legally and people with hard-to-control quirks. If you want, there is a local one that I can recommend to you. My son and his friend go there a few times a week. She offered, a sly edge to her eyes. Oh, well, I'm not Sue Dash. Izuku was speedily intercepted by his mother, who had the same sly glint as Dr. Kirishima. He would be happy to. Inko nearly shouted. Edash, Izuku was once again cut off, by his doctor no less. Great. It's a date then, I will send you the details. Your results will be ready tomorrow, so come in at 10 a.m. Okay, bye-bye. Dr. Kirishima shouted, shoving Izuku and his mother out of her office and slamming the door. Izuku had whiplash from the speed of the conversation. He turned to his mother, who was standing there with stars in her eyes as she was practically vibrating with excitement. He knew why she was excited. This was the first real friend he would be going out with since kindergarten. And she could get another mom friend. Nothing against his Auntie Mitsuki, but having only one friend since college can send you a bit nuts. Well, Izuku, Dr. Kirishima began, your results are in, and I must say these are the strangest results I have ever seen. We will start with your quirk factor. To put it simply, your quirk factor strength amounts to 75 QF. She paused, showing them the test results. The average person scores 25 QF on the test. If they have a powerful quirk, maybe 30. This news shocked the Midoriya family. I also discovered that although you can emit slime, your quirk mainly shows up as a transformation quirk. And what I see in your blood matches up with those who have a copying quirk. She paused after dropping another truth bomb onto the Midoriyas. There would also have to be a special way to activate it, as you would have thousands of quirks by now if you didn't. So the question I want to ask you, Izuku, is what have you recently done with a slime quirk user to attain their quirk? Oh, see, Izuku thought, having just remembered he had lied to his mother about the entire villain incident. He was in deep shit now. Dr. Kirishima must have felt his anxiety increase as she seemed to squint her eyes at the boy. WLYUC, Izuku stammered, his ever-famous stutter in full effect. I was walking into an underpass when a VV villain jumped out and attacked me. Izuku continued on to not allow his mother to respond. He was made of sludge, so he kinda engulfed me, shoving himself down my esophagus to try and choke me out. What? Screamed his mother, which made Izuku panic and start trying to defuse the situation. Mom, I'm okay. All Might saved me. I did pass out, but that is beside the point. Izuku got cut off by Dr. Kirishima, a thoughtful look on her face. Izuku, I think you may have another quirk on top of your slime and copying one. She stated very matter-of-factly. I haven't used any other ability but the slime one. Izuku asked. From what I have heard from your day, you must consume another's DNA to gain their quirk, she calmly explained. And since you had a large amount of slime in your lungs, All Might will have to have gotten it out. The most likely action a hero like him would have taken is to administer mouth to mouth. It suddenly dawned on Izuku. He might have taken a copy of All Might's quirk. Is there any way for me to check this? Or are we just guessing? Izuku asked disbelievingly. Well, Izuku, have I told you about my quirk? It is called Quirk Viewer and allows me to have a brief description of any quirk I see. She flashed a grin, briefly reminding Izuku of a shark due to her pointy teeth. It also allows me to use it on myself if I look in a mirror. I think you should copy my quirk so we can see if you have these 2 extra quirks, she said, plucking a hair from her head and moving her hand out into Izuku's face. Eat this, she proudly exclaimed. After gagging on one of Dr. Kirishima's thick dark hair. He had finally stopped gagging to feel a wave of energy pass through his body and a light feeling of fatigue tug at the back of his mind. Cough, I think I felt something, he said hoarsely, still not having recovered from the hair. All right, kid, I don't know how to explain this, but tense your eyes. You'll know you'll have done it when you start getting information about your quirk. Said encouragingly, passing him a mirror. He tried and tried, but he couldn't get it to work no matter how hard he tensed. He raged to himself, what kind of quirk is this? as he thought this information passed into his mind. Quirk, named. By ingesting another person's DNA, Izuku Midoriya can copy their quirk. Although the quirk gene ingested will mutate, causing a multitude of different reactions. The gene can mutate, causing the quirk to change from the original in functionality and ability. The next change is a type change, which means that an emitter can turn into a transformation type, and a transformation into a mutation type. The third type of change is a quirk fusion, where the newly copied fuses with a previously copied quirk to create an entirely new quirk which has properties from both parent quirks. And the final fourth kind of quirk is a strengthened quirk, where the quirk grows in power far faster than its original form. Please keep in mind that a copied quirk will have the strength of when it first manifested in the original user, thus you will have to train up your quirks your way. Current quirks. Unnamed. Ability to copy quirks. Fused with quirk viewer so user can view his quirks. Transformation type quirk. Branch off copy quirk. Slimeokinesis. The ability to create and manipulate slime. Mutation from quirk. Sludge. Emitter type quirk. Kinetic store. Your body absorbs any kinetic energy it contacts and converts it into quirk energy store that increases strength. Each time you absorb kinetic energy you increase the store, thus the strength you can tap into. Current maximum, 0.0x enhancement, mutation and strengthening of quirk. One for all, emitter type quirk. Branch off accumulation quirk. Izuku was truly flabbergasted. He had never expected to have a quirk this powerful. He quickly relayed all of the information back to Dr. Kirishima, who typed it all down onto his quirk registry profile. His mother, Inko, just sat there slack-jawed, unable to comprehend the power her son now wielded. Of course, she was happy for him, but this really gave him a chance at becoming a hero, and she didn't know how she felt about letting her baby run out into danger. Quickly Inko steeled herself. She had let her son down once before, and she would not do it again. If her son wanted to become a hero, she would support him 110% of the way. So, kid, what is the quirk's name? Dr. Kirishima inquired. I don't know, it just said unnamed for the quirk's name, Izuku answered. Well, get to naming it. We haven't got all day. She chided him. Okay, let me think, Izuku stammered, scrunching up his face in thought. How about inheritance? Izuku proudly declared. Lame name, but it's your quirk, I guess. Dr. Kirishima grumbled under her breath. Well, we will be on our way now. Inko cheerfully chirped. We need to get that gym membership paid for. As they walked out of the hospital, Izuku couldn't help but smile to himself. This was his first step to becoming a hero. Chapter 2. Woke up. Izuku stared out the car window, watching the city's scenery speedily fly by him as he kept using his quirk viewer just to make sure his quirks didn't disappear like some bad dream. When you use your new quirk your eyes light up, did you know that? She softly asked, a slight grin on her face. A deep red spread across the young boy's face. W. Why didn't you dash? I'm so embarrassed. He quietly squeaked. Oh, it's fine, Izuku, she cheerily replied, stifling a chuckle. I'm just happy to see you playing with your quirk. It's like watching a little kid. She failed to hold her laughter any further and let a slew of giggles escape. You also have your playdate after school with Dr. Kirishima's son. She reminded him, practically vibrating with excitement at the thought of her son having any form of social interaction with a boy his age. I know that the kids at your current school aren't very nice, so I have requested Sasamura Junior High to see if they will take you in. I should be getting a response in about a few weeks. She unloaded onto Izuku. What? How did you know I was being bullied? Izuku stopped, not being able to go further. Teased, he finished, overlooking the playdate comment. Izuku, I wash your clothes. Do you think I would miss scorch marks on a clear white school shirt? She asked sarcastically. But it's not that big of a deal. And now I have a quirk. So I can show them it and they won't tease me anymore. He exasperatedly exclaimed. Izuku, I don't want you to be around people who torment others just because they are different, and deep down, I think you don't want to be either. You can tell them about your quirk and you can try to make friends with them, but Inko looked over to her son, her big green eyes focused on his. I am getting you out of that school. They are also a bad influence on you if you still want to be a hero, that is. Izuku perked up at the statement. But I thought you said it was too dangerous. He asked with excitement in his eyes. That was because you would have no way to defend yourself. Now you have 5 quirks, with even more on the way. She said as they parked up next to their apartment building and began climbing the stairs. Although I still have my concerns, I am willing to look past them and support you in any way I can. His mother said as she unlocked the apartment door and walked inside. Which is why I want to give you this, she stated, closing the door and plucking a hair from her head. She then held out the hair in her hand for Izuku to take. There was a long silence between the two of them. What are you giving me? Izuku asked blankly, still not mentally adapted to having a copy quirk yet. My quirk. His mother shouted, moving the hair further into his face. How right? Izuku said, startled. Quickly, he grabbed the hair from his mother's hand and swallowed it, trying to ignore the sensation of the hair traveling down his throat. Suddenly, he felt an electrifying feeling travel across his body, signifying his quirk's acceptance of the power, and quickly went to take a nap after thanking his mother. It turns out that his quirk converted his stamina into energy, as instead of an hour-long nap he had slept for the rest of the day and was only woken up the next day to his phone alarm, which meant he was already going to be late. Rolling off the couch, Izuku groggily made his way to the bathroom and brushed his teeth. He got on his uniform and checked the note that his mom had left him on the front door before he left, which read, I packed your gym clothes for your playdate after school. Kirishima's son has black hair and sharp teeth like her. Make sure to meet him at the gym by 4. Love, Mom X. It's not a playdate, damn it. He grumbled a complaint under his breath which he wouldn't ever actually voice to her. He opened the front door and began the long, arduous journey to school. While sitting at his desk, Izuku stared off blankly, just wishing for the lesson to end already so he could get out of there. So far his day had gone the exact opposite of how he envisioned it. He came in halfway through the first PRD and was told off by the English teacher for being tardy. At the end of the class, he announced that he did have a quirk, which went a bit like this. Everyone, I have an announcement to make, he said, getting a few disdain-filled groans in response. Well, I'm going to cut straight to the point, I have a quirk. This caught the attention of the whole class. It called inheritance, and it allows me to copy someone else's quirk by ingesting someone else's DNA. He explained, getting a few intrigued looks from some of his classmates. So what you're saying is you will steal all our quirks? Bakugo slyly deduced. No, I would never. I want to be a hero. Izuku weakly defended. You can't become a hero with that evil quirk. You robo thief. The blonde shouted, pointing at Izuku with an accusatory tone. The other students quickly followed Bakugo, with their faces filling with fear of losing their individuality. That was the point where Izuku became an even bigger outcast than before. Recalling that yesterday he copied his mother's quirk, he decided to use Quirk Viewer to check it out and pass the time. Tensing his eyes, Izuku focused on his mother's quirk to get a more detailed description. He had discovered this in the car on the way home yesterday. Quirk, Orbit. This quirk allows you to create a gravitational field around an area. The field can be chosen to not affect certain objects of the user's choice and can also be made to affect the user himself. You can speed up the orbit of the object, and you can increase the gravitational pull of the field by increasing the density of the field center. Izuku was surprised by the quirk's development. His mother's original quirk was just the ability to attract small objects. This quirk would be useful for hero work. If he trained it enough, he could mutter. Izuku went on another mutter spree for the rest of his class, talking about the possible situations in that the quirk could be used, hypothetical combinations with his others, and future abilities it could have. His continuous ramblings to himself had gained the attention of the class, who were less than pleased. Shut the hell up, Dorobo! Bakugo shouted, using the thoughtful new name he had created for him. Sorry, Kaken. Izuku squeaked while turning bright red. The bell signaled the end of class, and Izuku quickly packed his things up, making use of orbit on his body to pick up things quicker. He managed to escape the building before Bakugo and his cronies tried to hassle him. As he scurried out of the building, he checked the time, 3:30 p.m. The clock read. He had an hour to get to the Quirk gym, and that was enough time. Izuku was walking towards the train station while checking the Hero News website, seeing that the police were doing a raid on a drag den in Hosu. Horrible news. Well, why did he think that? Heroes of today should be ashamed. Once again, not Izuku's thoughts. You will show them what a true hero is. Although he did want to be a good hero, these thoughts weren't his thoughts in his head. They felt foreign and separated from his normal thoughts, like they were placed into his brain. He pondered this as he sat down on the train, getting lost in his thoughts while the train began to move. He had decided that the thoughts were just someone with him using their telepathic quirk to mess with him. It wouldn't have been the first time. Izuku entered the gym very awkwardly. It was his first ever time being in a gym and he was petrified. Going into a new gym for the first time was already scary enough. Add that and crippling anxiety and whatever mental image you have is Izuku at the front desk. Hello, welcome to West Muzutafu Quirk Gym. Is this your first time? The woman at the front desk pleasantly asked. Would you like a tour? She pet her head to the side, smiling cutely. This was far too much for Izuku to handle and he shut down. WWIM and meeting a friend so not thank you. He rapidly waved his hands in front of him, a deep red glow slowly growing across his face. Okay then, sir. Just come ask me anything you need help with. God damn it, why was he so bad at talking to girls? Well, he was bad at talking to men too. He would just be intimidated and hide. You are just bad at talking in general, Izuku. How large was this quirk's area? And how did it know his name? Izuku was starting to get concerned. Last time it was just some guy who was making a prank video. This guy was practically stalking him. You must be Izuku Midoriya. A plain-looking boy with sharp teeth and black hair shouted while walking over to Izuku. Wait, black hair, sharp teeth, this was Dr. Kirishima's son. Why yeah, that's me, Izuku spoke shakily. You must be Kirishima, he said, a nervous smile on his face. Yep, but you can just call me Ijiro since we are going to be gym buddies. Wow, this guy was excited, first name straight off the bat. You can call me Izuku then. Having never made a first-name basis friend before, Izuku was having a very good day now. So, where should we start? He asked Kirishima. Well, first we have to start by seeing where you are with your quirk already. If you don't mind me asking, what is your quirk? My mom said it's the most interesting she has ever seen. Kirishima said, stars in his eyes. Izuku's friend-filled high immediately dropped as the reaction of his classmates earlier that day flashed through his mind. WLUSC, my Q quirk allows me to permanently copy anyone else's along as I ingest some of their DNA. Izuku finished, ending in an almost shouting type tone. Kirishima stayed in stunned silence, his brain whirring. He began, that's so. He continued, manly, he shouted, reminding Izuku of himself when he was younger. It was Izuku's turn to be surprised this time. You aren't scared? Izuku asked, still not believing what he was hearing. Of course. Think of all the possibilities with a quirk like that. You could copy another hero's quirk to help on the field, beat a villain with their own quirk, or just become the strongest person on the planet. Ijiro babbled on, Izuku's head spinning with all the information. He still doubted he wasn't scared. It was hard not to. The dark-haired boy seemed to sense this as his eyes softened. If you want, he pulled a hair from his head, you can have my quirk too. He offered with a big bright smile. I like this kid. Me to disembodied voice. But it's your quirk, and we just met. Who am I to use it? Izuku asked, tears pooling in his eyes. Although he likes to brave it out and put up a strong front, people calling him Dorobo and moving their chairs away from him really got to him. He especially didn't. Like the faces that his classmates made when they told them his quirk, the pure terror on their faces was something he would never want to make another person feel. You're my friend, why wouldn't I? Ijiro nonchalantly asked, placing the hair in his hand. You eat this, and I'll be over by the testing area. The taller boy patted his shoulder and walked into a room with a steel door. Scary. He quickly swallowed the hair and wiped the tears out of his eyes. He didn't want to look like a mess for his first friend. He felt an electrical feeling hover over his body before disappearing. New quirk. Hardening, obsidian style. You have copied the hardening quirk, but a little different. While Ijiro Kirishima can spread his hardening all across his body, you can only have it on 25 of your body at any time. This can be increased with training. Do not worry though. While Ijiro started with the hardness of eggshells, you start at the strength of obsidian. You also can strengthen your power at around double the speed of his. This was a lot. The original form of hardening was already fit for hero work beforehand, but now it was perfect. He had to show Ijiro. And he wasn't that tired. It looked like the more quirks he absorbed, the less its drawback could affect him. Ijiro! Izuku waved at the other boy, interrupting his wall-punching session?
Oh.
Bro. Did you get it? He asked, excitement in his voice. Not exactly, he said, raising his arm and activating the quirk. Immediately his skin turned a solid black color. Parts of it glinted in the lights from the ceiling.
Oh.
My quirk doesn't do that, he said with an exasperated look on his face. Yeah, when I copy quirks they always change in some way, like how my mom's went from attraction to orbit. He explained, using the quirk on a piece of the wall near his feet. Your quirk got harder and easier to train when it transferred to me, but I can only use it on 25% of my body for now. Izuku quickly added at the end. Well, how about we start training then? The dark-haired boy slammed his fist into his arm, a grin making its way across his face. Tell me what your quirks are and show me them in action. The first quirk I have is called Slime-okinesis, he said, creating a football-sized, English football, glob of slime and dropping it onto the floor. Izuku then explained his quirk. It allows me to create a slime-like substance from anywhere on my body. He made the slime transform into a multitude of shapes before solidifying it and making it drop to the floor with a muffled thunk. I can then control the slime any way I want and can change the properties. I can also make it dissolve at any moment. He said, flicking his hand to make the slime dissolve. I can make about 120 gallons of slime and control it before it becomes too taxing. Next is Orbit, which I copied from my mom. It gives me the power to create a gravitational field anywhere in a 20 m radius around me. The max strength of the fields decreases the further away the field is from me. Izuku said, attracting a few pebbles up his body and releasing the field as they hovered over his palm, dropping them into his hand. I have a fourth quirk, but I can't show it to you. It says I need to collect kinetic energy to use it, but I think it enhances my physical abilities, Izuku explained. Well, you know there is only one way to test that, Ijiro stated, a grin widening on his face. How do you know? No, Ijiro, we can talk about this, please. The green-haired lad's expression darkened, and he began to back up. Detroit. Ijiro began, giving Izuku a chance to begin running. Izuku had managed to make it about 7 meters from the boy before he rushed to him, swinging his hardened fist hard at him. Smash! He screamed, imitating the famous number 1 hero. Izuku quickly hardened his face just before the collision, sending him tumbling to the floor. Although he was still in pain from the fall, the point of contact wasn't damaged. Izuku checked his kinetic store quirk to check, and yep, 0.01x enhancement. He hated how Ijiro was right. Did it work? Ijiro asked, reaching out a hand for Izuku to grab. Yes, Izuku said quietly, still said, as the other boy pulled him up. Sorry for springing that on you, I didn't mean to hurt you. How do you punch someone while not trying to hurt them? If it makes you feel any better, the way you took that punch was so manly, he said, trying to lift the other boy's spirits. Izuku immediately turned red after being described with the unfamiliar adjective. Well, it's nothing, really, I just hardened my F face where I thought your F fist would land. The young boy sputtered, waving his hands to cover himself. It was still manly. The other boy protested. Anyway, we should probably go check out that quirk of yours, he exclaimed, dragging Izuku to the gym area. Being set under a pull-up bar, Izuku had only just gotten out of his stupor and began noticing his surroundings. What are we in here for? We are going to test your normal physical capabilities versus your enhanced ones. The taller boy revealed a grin, a laugh etched into his face. Oh God! Izuku thought as Ijiro ordered him to do as many pull-ups as possible. After agreeing to meet every other day and exchanging phone numbers, Kirishima let Izuku go. It seemed that Kinetic Store's current output only boosted his abilities by a very small, practically non-existent amount. After greeting his mother and eating the protein-packed dinner she made him, Izuku decided to go to bed and practically fell asleep right away. Izuku awoke in a strange place. A smoky black void with nothing around him but glowing orbs he recognized as his quirks. Suddenly a glowing white figure arose from the darkness, its form constantly changing as if on fire. The being settled on a humanish form, as close to human as being comprised of entirely white mist can get you. Izuku Midoriya, the humanoid, spoke. "Grow strong, make friends, and work hard." He paused. "The path will be dangerous, and you may feel you are not up to the task at hand, but always remember you have a power far beyond that of others. Use that power to protect others by any means necessary." The man finished. Suddenly he began to fade, his wisps becoming fainter and less common. "It seems my time is almost up." He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "I know you can become the greatest hero this world has been graced with." The mass said warmly as if it could smile, "I shall be speaking to you again very soon," and with that, he was gone. God, Izuku was in pain. For context, Izuku had come to the beach as he had promised himself, but it was far from what he had expected. So far he had had 3 pieces of trash fall onto him, fallen off a trash pile into the sand below, and been attacked by a seagull. It was safe to say he wasn't having the most pleasant of times. But the plan worked, and that's all that mattered. His muscles aching meant they would get stronger, and he had gotten his kinetic store to 0.03, so he was making progress. He needed muscle to become a hero. That was just a fact that he was ready to accept. But geez, this was hard. Izuku huffed as he heaved a piece of a car into the scrapyard. His legs felt like jelly as he walked out of the scrapyard. He headed back to the beach to collect his things. He needed to get home soon as it had already gotten dark out and Inko would begin to worry. The boy slung his rucksack over his shoulder and began to walk back to his house. "Nice job, kid." The voice was becoming far more common, and now he was certain it wasn't a quirk. Walking through his front door, Inko pleasantly greeted him. "Izuku, welcome back. I made you dinner. I didn't expect you to be out so long, so your lunch is in the microwave waiting for you," she explained to the boy. "Thanks, Mom," Izuku said, sluggishly grabbing the plate of food and placing it on the table. He sat down and practically inhaled the meal off of the table, savoring every bite. Placing his plate into the dishwasher, he wished his mother good night and dragged himself to his bedroom to sleep. 1.5 months later. Izuku had been working on himself a lot since the start of his training, and so far he had managed to increase his gravity field range to about 23 meters, increase the amount of slime he can create to 124 gallons, his obsidian form had grown considerably more durable, and he could harden 27% of his body. The biggest change of them all, though, was his kinetic store quirk. He had increased the enhancement ability to about 0.5x added onto his base strength, and he had also discovered that enhancement meant enhancement. His quirk had enhanced everything about him: his reaction speed, his perception, his information processing speed, and his regeneration speed. When at the lower strength it wasn't very noticeable, but once you start watching people talk out of sync as you have 1.5x the perception speed of a regular human, you begin to notice. Or when you cut yourself on a piece of metal only to find it fully healed after 2 days. Or when you have finished the first 5 pages of a book in less than 2 pages. Luckily, Izuku had figured out he just had to actively choose not to use the quirk in those areas, but he had discovered a secret perk of those abilities. He could regenerate his muscles faster than the normal person, meaning his workouts become far more rewarding. Instead of having to wait for 8 weeks to see any results from working out, he would only have to wait for about 6, which sounds far less useful than it is. If Izuku can get his kinetic store to double his normal functions, he could finish the beach cleanup in half of the projected time, just before the UA entrance exams, giving him more time to MSTR his quirks. Overall, Izuku was very proud of himself. "Okay, kid, time to wrap things up. Your mom will be waiting for you." The voice in his head echoed, sounding like an old man. "Okay, why I will," Izuku thought in response. It was very strange. The green-haired boy had formed a coexistence bond with the voice, like a "you don't bother me, I won't bother you" agreement where both parties had mutual respect. He had managed to pester the thing enough for it to reveal its name as Y, which was a bit too mysterious for Izuku's liking, but oh well. Things at school hadn't gotten any better since we last saw Izuku, maybe even worse. The boy was being avoided like a clown at a funeral, nobody looked at him, nobody spoke to him, and everybody had moved their desks as far away from him as they were allowed to make sure he didn't copy their quirks. He had started to miss the times when they bully him, at least then he interacted socially with people. Now the only people who spoke to him were Ijiro, his mom, and Y. You have to know you are lonely when 1/3 of the people you speak to are a voice in your head. Izuku was very lonely. Ijiro was a great friend, but Izuku was too scared to ask him if he wanted to go out in case he interrupted his hangouts with his friends from school. His mom was, well, his mom. He couldn't just ask her if she wanted to hang out because she is your mother and that is just called helping run errands. And finally, Y wasn't chatty at the best of times and was, once again, just a voice in his head at the end of the day. Thus, Izuku just focused on training his body quirks and mind. He had practically stopped cutting his haircut and so far it had grown about 2.5 inches, which is quite a lot. He still showered and kept hygienic, but only to the bare minimum that was socially acceptable. He got home and walked over to his mother to greet her, but stopped after noticing she was hyper-focused on her phone. "Mom, is everything all right?" he asked, tapping her on the shoulder. "Izuku honey, I have just gotten an email from Sasamura and they said that your report was immaculate and that we can have a tour on the weekend." She squealed the last part, tears in her eyes. "Well, really?" Izuku sputtered. "That's great. I can't wait." He almost shouted. "You can finally have a normal school life," she said excitedly. "Go out with friends, join clubs, get a girlfriend." Inko continued, a sly smile creeping across her mug. Izuku spat out the drink he had just picked up and drank. "Well, Mom, we don't need to go thinking all about the future now, do we?" Izuku quickly exclaimed, trying to keep a shade of red from reaching his face. Inko just chuckled as they sat down for their meal. She loved how the boy reacted whenever she brought up girls around him. Izuku went to bed that night with his brain racing, thinking about this new chapter of his life he was about to begin. One where he met nice people or one where it all went to shit again. Who knows? Well, Izuku would after he was formally added to the school student list in a few weeks, so he had lots of time to think. Quirk Glossary. Inheritance, fused with Quirk Viewer. Slime Okinesis, 124 gallons. Kinetic Store, 0.5x Enhancement Max. Orbit, 23 meters. Hardening, 27% body coverage. Chapter 3. First day. Izuku was shaking. He thought he would be alright seeing as it was only for about 8 months, but geez, his anxiety must have been worse than he thought. It made sense though, as the past 2 months since his quirks manifested, that also means that the boy has only really had a proper conversation with 2 people, why doesn't count. This meant that his social skills had almost gone into the negatives, so he wasn't expecting to be making any friends today. He thickly swallowed, fiddling with the button on his sleeve as he waited to be called into his new homeroom class. The teacher seemed to have just finished roll call as she then once again began to speak. "Before your first PRD, I would like to introduce a new member of our class." He heard her say through the door. "You can come in now, Midoriya," she said. He slid open the door, expecting a bunch of faces to be glaring back at him, but luckily they seemed to be mostly just intrigued by the green-haired boy. This was a relief to Izuku, as he had gotten accustomed to the moods of his classmates drastically dropping once he entered the room, yet this time it was not the case. He stepped up to the podium to introduce himself. Hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya," he stammered, briefly wondering if Kinetic Store amplified his stutter. "I have T-transferred from Aldra Junior High. I hope we can be friends." The word friends felt foreign in Izuku's mouth. "Okay everyone, you can question Midoriya in your own time," the teacher blandly stated, as if anyone questioned him. "Midoriya, go sit at the free desk next to Fukushima." The teacher instructed him. A blue-haired girl with a pretty face raised her hand to signal him to where she was. "Weiss ma'am," he mumbled while making his way to his seat. "So class, get out your maths textbooks and turn to page 103. The teacher stated, beginning the lesson. Izuku was only about 15 minutes away from the bell signaling the end of the first PRD before he felt a light tapping at the back of his head. He ignored it at first, until the tapping became harder and more distinct, like a small bouncy ball tapping his head. Izuku, something hit you. Thanks for the information, I hadn't noticed, Izuku sarcastically thought. He then heard giggling. Oh no, he knew what was happening and couldn't say he liked it. But being the non-confrontational person he let it be. It was only a few minutes until the between lesson break so he could leave. In the quarter of an hour left of the lesson, Izuku must have felt at least 60 different balls of varying sizes ping off of his back. Where are they getting all of these bouncy balls? He thought frustratedly as another ball pinged off of him. Whoever was doing this was persistent to annoy Izuku that day. The bell rang and the teacher dismissed them, finally got to see the cretin who had been flinging things off of him a quarter of the lesson. He turned to see a pastel pink-haired girl with pink and blue heterochromatic eyes and a malicious look on her face. What are you looking at? She snarled at the greenette. Nothing. Izuku squeaked, turning away and shrinking into his chair. He wasn't liking the new start so far, he thought things would be different. Izubro! Shouted a familiar voice from the doorway. Vajiro! Izuku shouted back, his face glowing red as everyone turned to look at him. I thought you went to a different school? The boy said in a normal voice while pulling up a chair, to not cause Midoriya any further embarrassment. Why I did, but I transferred, Izuku spoke softly as usual. I didn't know you came here. Izuku returned the question. Well, that doesn't matter. How long have you been coming? Ijiro inquired. Today is my first day, it's not going too well though, Izuku complained. What? How come? Ijiro asked, worried about his friend's well-being. Well, you see. He told Ijiro about the pink-haired girl in the seat behind and how she was flinging things at him in class. I also don't know what to say about my quirk. I'm scared everyone will be scared of me again if I tell the truth, you know, Ijiro? Ijiro? Izuku noticed that his friend had up and vanished while he was ranting about his problems and went to start an argument with the previously mentioned problem. Hey, have you been throwing things at my friend? Ijiro angrily asked the girl before him. She looked up at him with an appraising look before she put her phone away and stood up to face him. And what if I did? You sure ain't doing nothing, she said with a smug grin. Izuku just watched in horror as his best friend began burning all of his potential social bridges. Who do you think you are? Kirishima raised his voice, gaining some of the class's attention. Eiji, it's not that big a deal. Just leave it, Izuku said, trying to defuse the situation. Shut it, broccoli head. The mean girl snapped, silencing Izuku but enraging Kirishima. Don't talk to him like that. You beetroot-headed beach. Ijiro roared with pure fury. What did you call me, you pound carrot, dollar pound carrot, pound carrot? She screamed. Oh, you and dollar pound carrot and percent and dollar percent carrot dollar percent and carrot and dollar percent pound dollar carrot underscore dollar pound percent dollar carrot, Ijiro retaliated. Soon the two just began stringing together profanities that would make them fit in an OG COD lobby. At least Izuku had learnt a few new words at school. Once Izuku had managed to drag the taller boy away from the inevitable fight and teach him how to calm down, the two boys decided to meet outside next to the field to eat lunch together. Hopefully the day got better after this. It did not get better. In any way, shape or form. The pink-haired lass, whom Izuku had learned was called Asahi Saki, increased the quantity and speed of her ball, which pummeled Izuku's back around every 30 seconds. I don't think she likes you. Good observation, Izuku thought to his ethereal buddy. Why had been extra vocal today, and Izuku didn't want to be rude. The bell went to signify the beginning of lunch and the teacher walked out of the classroom. Izuku quickly began to pack up his things and made sure that his quirk notebook was the first thing safely stored in his backpack. He then stood up and left the room to search for the spot where he would meet Ijiro. It seems both the boys seemed to overlook the very vital fact that Izuku had no idea how to get to where he was going, meaning he was just wandering around the school like some ghost. Given his long hair that only just managed to cover his eyes and his hunched posture, he could have very easily been turned into an urban school legend. Izuku had just found the door to the outside world, having a sigh of relief once he found Kirishima waiting for him around the corner. With a girl? Izubro! Over here! Ijiro yelled, without waiting for the other boy's response, grabbed him and dragged him over to his previous spot. Hey, Ashido, this is the gym bro I keep telling you about, he said excitedly to the pink girl, who seemed a little disappointed. Aw man, I thought he was gonna be a super buff hunk type of dude. Turns out he was just some scrawny kid, no offense. She complained to herself. Izuku was too flustered to respond. The boy didn't know how not to be offended. He had worked hard for his muscles, damn it. Ijiro must have heard his internal struggles as he immediately jumped to defend him. Izuku is buff. His muscles are just more compacted. For efficiency. Izuku almost felt bad for how his friend tried to compliment his physique, but then remembered it was completely his fault he was in this situation. Yeah. The pink girl gave one last glance, just to make sure. Sure. Dear God, please kill me now. Izuku mentally pleaded after the confrontation. Can we just eat now? Izuku quietly asked his friend, not having the confidence to ask the girl. Sure thing. We were talking about where we should eat just before you got here, Ashido said, causing Izuku to blush furiously. He didn't get much, any, social interaction with girls in his old school, so he was a bit, very, jumpy around them. Ashido noticed this and a devilish grin spread across her face. She had a new toy to tease. The group made their way towards the spot the other two had agreed on earlier. Walking around the school, Ashido decided to make some light conversation. So Green Bean, what's your quirk? She asked innocently. Izuku had known this question would come up, but his precious brainstorming time was cut short due to his hardening friend. Ijiro looked at him knowingly. He had come to understand Izuku's predicament. There would always be people scared of his quirk no matter how hard he tried to prove him wrong. Both boys stopped walking. WYCDish. Izuku stopped as he felt hardening activate all over his upper chest. What the? He was then alerted by why. Something is about to hit you. Why, what are you talking about? Izuku asked, taking a step backwards. Although it wasn't uncommon for Y to speak to him, he had no idea he could affect his body, never mind his quirks. Izuku then felt a small round pellet smash into his left pectoral muscle. He then saw a marble-like object fall out of his shirt. Izuku, are you okay? Kirishima shouted to his friend, running back seeing he was on the floor. Izuku quickly ripped open his shirt to check the damage. Luckily Y had activated hardening so the damage would be reduced, but holy moly that hurt. He saw that there was a dent where the bullet had hit and lots of the surrounding material had chipped and fallen off. Izuku deactivated his quirk, which was one of the biggest mistakes he could have made. Instantly the area started bleeding profusely as the originally hard material had kept his blood inside his body, but now he was back flesh. You couldn't see the dent and cracks spiderwebbing out of it due to a large amount of blood leaking out from them. This didn't even cover the pain he was in now. Sure, the impact hurt, but that was like comparing a bug bite to a shark bite, completely different. Oh shit, Ashido said, noticing a large amount of blood flowing from Izuku's chest. We need to get him to the nurse. Now. Although weak, the nurse's healing quirk would be useful to try and stop the bleeding. Ijiro quickly hoisted Izuku over his shoulder, making sure to be careful not to hurt him. Izuku, harden your wound to stop the blood. Izuku followed the order, although due to losing so much blood he was on the verge of passing out. As the group rushed to the infirmary, Izuku couldn't help but notice a certain shade sticking out from the green of the trees. Pink. Izuku wondered aloud, before passing out. Asahi had made a mistake. A really big mistake. She hadn't meant to hit Broccoli Head, just scare him a little. It's his fault for stepping back. Was it? The girl just stood there in shock, only startled into motion by the bell signaling the end of lunch. She quickly ran to her next lesson, which she just so happened to share with her most recent victim. She prayed he was in the classroom, but she knew he wouldn't be. Her quirk, Oddball, allowed her to create a pink ball of varying size and properties, e.g. density, adhesiveness, etc. She could then fire them off at high speeds. When it first manifested, she could only make very soft ball that were the size of small marbles, and she could only fire them off at about 5 meters per second. But after hitting PBRTY and training to become a hero, She could fire them off over 500 meters per second and make them into the size of basketballs. She can also increase the density to the point they are almost mini diamonds. So she knew he wouldn't be in class as she had practically just shot him with a handgun. She was actually surprised he had managed to stop the ball in its tracks. She sat down in her seat and pulled out her notebook. Could Asahi Saki please make their way to the infirmary? Thank you. The speaker above the door screeched. Sheet, the girl mumbled. Well, Miss Saki, it seems that you have had quite the afternoon. The principal said to her as she walked up to him. I assume you know why you are here? He asked with a quirked eyebrow. Asahi nodded solemnly, not making eye contact with the large man. Usually I would expel you on the spot. The girl winced at the bluntness of the man. But I know you have applied for UA's hero course, and this sort of thing would ruin your chances of any hero course, never mind UA. Once again the girl found herself cringing at the sentence. So I will let Mr. Midoriya decide your punishment, as he is the victim of your attack. Asahi's head snapped up at this. She was sure she was going to lose her chance at being a hero. Well, she still could lose that chance, and it wasn't looking very good for her. Her future was now in the hands of the boy that she just shot. Oh no. Well, how about we go in and ask him? The girl didn't have a chance to respond as she was pushed into the room. Good luck, the teacher wished the girl before closing the door and leaving the girl bewildered. The girl turned away from the door and immediately was met with Izuku lying in one of the beds, half of his shirt ripped off and a bandage on his chest. Hello Midoriya. The girl immediately turned red from embarrassment after such a scuffed entrance. Hopefully, she could salvage it. Hello Saki, Izuku softly spoke. What do you need? The boy was very clearly apprehensive to talk to the girl. To be fair, she had been mean to him all day, so she could understand. WLUSE, Asahi swallowed, steeling herself. I have come to apologize, she said bowing. W what for? Class? It's okay, Ijiro shouldn't have been rude to you. Izuku sputtered, turning red and waving his hands in front of his face. Asahi felt a pang of guilt pulling at her heart. No, well that also, she said scratching the back of her head. But also this. She pointed at Izuku's newest wound. Oh that. Izuku said, sadness crossing his face for a brief second. Oh. It's fine, my hardening quirk took the brunt of the damage and the impact increased my strength quirk Eep. Izuku slapped a hand over his mouth and made a little squeal-like noise. It was very clear he didn't mean to say that. You have 2 quirks? Asahi asked, quite befuddled. Well actually I have 6, Izuku corrected the pink-haired girl. Okay, anyway, the girl proceeded, I was trying to scare you earlier, but I didn't expect you to step backwards. She said sheepishly. The principal said that you are the one who decides my punishment. He said he didn't immediately expel me immediately because I want to be a hero. She revealed, it's okay if you want me expelled since I, shot you. She snorted humorlessly. As if on command, the principal walked into the room. Well, Midoriya, what is her punishment? He asked. Izuku adopted a thinking face. He knew that she could have killed him if not for why. She had also been nasty to him in class, launching her bouncy ball off him, but something was caring about her. It was something he couldn't put his finger on it, but he could tell she wanted to be a hero just like him and Ijiro, although for different reasons. I have decided, the boy declared. Both listened intently, Asahi more so as her entire life's work was on the line. Saki will receive detention for the time it takes for me to heal this wound. Izuku exclaimed proudly. The 2 listeners just sat there flabbergasted. That's it. They shouted in unison, causing Izuku to reel back. Listen, Midoriya, the principal said. She shot you, and you are giving her 2 weeks detention, he stated in a very confused manner. Well, it will only be about 1 week because of one of my quirks, but at this time I won't be able to train, so I will be there too. Izuku protested. Very well then. Asahi Saki, as of today, you have a week's detention and I will be informing your parents. The older man sighed defeatedly. The girl was stunned at this boy's level of forgiveness. She had almost killed him and he gave her a week-long detention. Just trying to think about the boy's logic made her head hurt. Okay then, there's no point in either of you going back to your current lesson, so just go to your next lesson when the bell goes. Goodbye. The principal said, getting up and walking to the door. And Saki, he said, turning to look at the girl. Don't shoot anyone else. He finished sliding the door shut. Why would you do that? Saki quietly asked, looking down and trying not to make eye contact with the boy. Do what? Izuku innocently questioned. Let me get off scot-free. She said angrily, tears pricking her eyes. I almost killed you, and you still let me become a hero. Why? She demanded. Will you just seem nice? He said, flashing his sunshine smile, almost blinding everyone else in the room. The girl just snorted. Dumps, she said, standing up and wandering to the door. You might want to get a new shirt. The next lesson is in 5 minutes. This caused the green-haired boy to burn red, quickly covering himself with his hands. See ya later, Midoriya. She waved to him. Izuku quickly got a new shirt from the nurse and began walking to his next lesson. The day had gotten much better. In detention. So, Saki, what's your quirk? Izuku idly asked the girl in a desperate attempt at making conversation. My quirk? Oh, it's nothing interesting. She said, surprisingly humbly for her personality. It's called Oddball. It gives me the ability to create any kind of ball I want, then lets me fire them at high speeds. She spoke nonchalantly. Don't know how I'll get into UA with it, but I'll DMN well try. She said, a determined edge to her voice. Nothing interesting. That quirk is way cool. It basically makes you into a walking armory. Izuku fanboyed with stars in his eyes. You can rapidly fire out ball without much thought, spreading the opponent instantly, or use more compact and precise shots. Like a sniper. It's not that cool. She protested with a tint of red leaking onto her face. My uncle can turn objects and people into marbles, then turn them back by touching them. That's way cooler. Asahi argued. Although your uncle's quirk is more flashy, he can only work at close range, but you can work at any range. Izuku countered with ease. What about your quirks? How did you get so many? Saki asked, changing the subject to avoid any more praise. Oh well, my original quirk is called Inheritance and allows me to copy another person's quirk by ingesting some of their DNA. Then I got a slime quirk from a villain, a strength quirk off a hero, a telekinesis quirk from my mom, and a hardening quirk off of my best friend Ijiro. Izuku finished the list. Wow, you must be so lucky. How do you keep track of them all? She asked curiously. Oh, my doctor also gave me a quirk that lets me see my other quirks, but I wouldn't say I'm lucky. The boy stated. When I copy a quirk, it isn't exactly how it was before and it changes, making them harder to understand. And it starts back at 0, meaning I have to train it up from the level of a 4-year-old to hero material while training other quirks also. He explained. Oh man, that's rough. The girl empathized. I remember how hard I had to train to get my quirk from being bouncy ball to bullets. She laughed. Yeah, also people at my old school were scared of me. Izuku somberly said. Scared? Of you? Why? She confusedly questioned. I think they were just afraid of losing their individuality. It didn't help that my ex-childhood friends started calling me Der Robo, thief, Izuku said, sniffling back a tear. Noticing this, Asahi did the only thing she knew how to cheer up her new friend, insult someone. Well, I think that he's an a-hole. Your quirks are really cool, she shouted. Why, you know what? Dorobo's super cool hero name. She said, not thinking. Really? Izuku said skeptically. Dorobo, thief, is a good name for a hero? He splayed out with a hint of amusement on his face. Saki's face gradually warmed up, realizing what she just said. It's just, shut up. The girl slammed her face on the desk to hide her embarrassment. All right, you two, you can leave now, the teacher watching them said. I'm home. Izuku shouted as he walked through the door of his house. Welcome back, Izuku. How has your day been? Did you make any friends? His mother rattled off the questions as if rehearsed. She was already standing at the door. Well, funny thing actually. Izuku began. Ijiro was there, and he introduced me to this girl called Ishido, his girlfriend. Anyway, she has pink skin and black eyes. Here came the part he was dreading. I met this other G-girl, Asahi Saki. She was nice. Inko Midoriya's mind had a blue screen. It seemed her mother's software wasn't up to speed with her son's age due to him being a complete social piranha since the age of 4. It seemed she now got to ask the more grown-up questions. Is she cute? This one question had caused Izuku Midoriya's mind to blue screen. She is quite pretty. W8 no. And not pretty. It's, Izuku sputtered like a fish out of water. Interesting. He concluded. She had a very interesting face. It would have been believable if he hadn't adopted a red glow that was on par with a dwarf star. Her face was interesting? She asked with a knowing look and quirked eyebrow. Yep. He said with a wobbly smile. Sure, I'll believe you. What else happened? She said, swiftly moving on. Oh yeah, and I got shot. Izuku had forgotten to text his mother about this while in detention with Saki. His mother did a double take. You got shot. By who? How? His mother worried, rightfully so, over her son. Oh well, Saki tried to scare me with her quirk, but I stepped back and ended up getting hit by one of her marbles. Her quirk is really interesting actually. It lets her create these ball and mutter. Inko only really listened to the first half of the sentence. Izuku, your new friend shot you? Inko asked, fury brimming from her small form. Why yeah, but it was by accident though. Izuku had only seen his mother this angry when he had spilt orange squash onto her newly cleaned carpet when he was 10. That was a scary experience. If that girl ever tries to hurt you again, I will personally end her existence. Izuku was sure he could see red glowing from her eyes as she said that. Okay mom, Izuku squeaked, I'm going to go to eat my food now. The boy had learned that the best thing to do in these situations was to let his mother cool off unless he wanted to face her wrath. As Izuku finished up his food, his mind gravitated back towards the incident at school today, specifically how Y reacted. He knew Y could react to the outside world, but not to the point where he can predict marble shots. Also, the voice, which to Izuku's knowledge so far, wasn't able to control the boy's body, had managed to activate one of his quirks meant that he could at least control his quirks. Hey Y, how come today you were able to use my quirk without me commanding it? Izuku asked the voice. We will talk later. The voice was very vague with its instructions, and Izuku would wait for 2 hours until he decided the talk wasn't coming and went to bed. As he tucked himself off to sleep, Izuku began to see images of a black-haired man with piercing green eyes. Well, we meet again Izuku. What Izuku presumed was Y spoke. I know you have many questions about today, but first I am going to explain something about quirks you may not know. The voice began. Although quirks are very much a physical thing, they rely heavily on the mental strength of the user. This is why they begin weak and hard to train, but as you grow older they become stronger as your brain develops more and more. If you don't train your quirk it won't affect your mental capacity, but if you do the opposite then your brain won't be able to handle the quirks and your brain will shut down. Usually a human brain can contain one quirk to its maximum and issues don't occur, but when you begin adding more quirks to one brain things get messy. Izuku's expression darkened as he began to process what Y was saying. That is a problem that your quirk was faced with when you first manifested, and that is why I am here. Y continued, unfazed by his previous statement. Your power had to create the equivalent of a supercomputer using your genetic code. Instead your quirk created the person with the strongest mind in your bloodline and made their mental strength grow over time, so your quirk didn't kill you as soon as you got over multiple. Your quirk made me combat the effects of singularity, and due to being used as a store for your quirks and connected to your mind, I can use your abilities. I, however, cannot control your actual body. Izuku was flabbergasted by this information. He didn't know it was possible to have quirks that created sentient beings. Your quirk viewer will tell you your capacity and how close you are to reaching it, and as you grow your quirks, will increase gradually. Y finished his explanation. I hope we speak again soon, Izuku, Y added before fading away, stirring Izuku awake. Chapter 4. Progress. Izuku woke up soaked in sweat, his pajamas clinging to his body. He looked over to his clock which read 4:30 a.m. He decided it was time to get up as there was no way he was sleeping after that conversation. He turned on the shower and began to strip, then a thought occurred, "Hey, why? Can you see me right now?" "Yes, I can." "Why are you looking at me while I'm changing?" "Pervert!" he screamed, his face turning beet red. "Izuku, there is no need to be embar. Like hell there isn't. You are like my grandfather or something." The boy interrupted him, "That's weird. Izuku, I am part of your body. I have seen everything you have done in the past 2 months. So wadash?" Izuku then adopted a look of embarrassed understanding. "Never mind," he mumbled sheepishly, clambering into the shower. Once he felt adequately clean, Izuku got dried off and went to grab a snack from the kitchen. Activating Quirk Vision, Izuku checked for changes with his quirks. Quirk. Inheritance. Ability to copy quirks. Fused with Quirk Viewer so user can view his quirks. Transformation type quirk, branch off copy quirk. Capacity 6/8, +1, 43%. Quirks collected. Slimeokinesis, the ability to create and manipulate slime. Mutation from quirk, Sludge, emitter type quirk. Kinetic store, your body absorbs any kinetic energy it contacts and converts it into quirk energy store that increases strength. Each time you absorb kinetic energy you increase the store, thus the strength you can tap into. Current maximum, 1.13x enhancement, mutation and strengthening of quirk. 1 for all, emitter type quirk, branch off accumulation quirk. Orbit, user can create gravitational fields around themselves in a certain radius. The user can choose what is and isn't affected by the field. Current radius, 25 meters. Mutation and strengthening from quirk, weak attraction, emitter type quirk. Hardening, obsidian style, the user can transform their skin into an obsidian-like substance. Though it starts at around the strength of glass, you can easily train it up by just damaging it and letting it repair. Currently the strength of copper. Strengthening of quirk, hardening, transformation type quirk. Holy heck! That was a massive increase in the kinetic store. On Saturday it was only 0.55x. It must have been the ball that were hit off of him the day before, and maybe getting shot had something to do with it. The capacity reader was also new. Y was said to increase the capacity he had to work on his quirks. It was that or die, and Izuku liked being alive so he needed to train. Unfortunately, his injury caused by his newest friend prevented him from going to the gym in case of any further damage. Speaking of which, the incessant stabbing pain, courtesy of the wound, had been absent all morning. Izuku raised his shirt and slowly unwrapped his bandage, which had blood all over it. He was dazzled by the lack of a wound. The only thing there was a large scar that resembled cracked glass. Izuku liked it. He thought he could look really menacing with it. Unfortunately for him, he was the least threatening person in Japan. After finishing his snack, Izuku decided to go down to the beach to get some training before school. Although the skinny man with long blonde hair who Y pointed out to him was a bit strange. Izuku was hyping himself up to confront the man but was beaten to it. "Are you cleaning this beach by yourself, young man?" the stranger asked. "Weiss," Izuku stammered squeakily. He wasn't ready to be questioned and was caught off guard. Why? This was a question Izuku was more prepared to answer. Many people had asked him this while they watched him drag pieces of car to a scrapyard. "I'm training to go to UA and become a hero," Izuku answered wholeheartedly. "It also helps the community out. This beach used to be appealing but fly tippers covered it in garbage. So I'm trying to clean it all as training." The man nodded, humming to himself. "And why do you want to become a hero?" This question had thrown Izuku for a bit of a loop. He had never really thought about it. It was just something he always wanted to become, even after his quirkless diagnosis. Izuku scoured his brain to try and find the answer. He decided the dream began once he saw All Might's debut video, and then the answer came to him. "I want to save people with a smile. I want to make people feel safe and stand up for the weak," Izuku concluded. "Good answer, kid," the man said gruffly. "I hope I see more of you in the future." He swiveled around and walked away. "Okay." Izuku stared off after the man. Checking his watch, Izuku did some mental calculations and decided to go in around 30 minutes to make it to school on time. He then set back off on carrying trash to the scrapyard. Yo, broccoli head. Asahi barked. It seems even after their friendship had been established, she still had her thuggish attitude. You want to eat lunch together? The girl's face had a tinge of red to it as she asked, playing with her hands and not making eye contact. Izuku almost had whiplash from the shift in her demeanor. Izuku was swiftly cut off by a protective voice. I will not allow you alone with that girl without my supervision, Izubro. Kirishima said, putting himself between the two. A breathing Ishido was close behind him, however. Kirishima, can we please go for lunch? I'm starving. The pink girl whined. No. Not until he is away from this harlot. He shouted defiantly. Harlot. Asahi stammered. Not trying to do that. Red spread across her as she covered her face in embarrassment. Ijiro, it's okay, we are friends now. Izuku offered to try to quell Ijiro's rage. You can go have lunch with your girlfriend. We aren't like that. Both teens shouted simultaneously. Fine, you can go. The boy backed down. Just remember, I'm not fine with it. He gave one more glare to the pink-haired girl before stomping off in a huff, followed by Ishido, who seemed a bit more pink than usual. Making their way to the lunch hall, the two ordered their food and sat down. There is something I want to give you, Asusher said to Izuku as they ate. Emichim? The boy acknowledged as he stuffed his face. I want you to copy my quirk. She said valiantly as if giving him a knighthood. Okay. Izuku simply replied. A bit caught off guard by the short response, Asahi put out her hand. Well then, get on with it. She stuttered as Izuku just stared blankly at her hand. You do remember how my quirk works, right? Izuku asked disbelievingly. I need to consume some of your DNA to copy your quirk. He exclaimed, visibly amused. On the other hand, Asahi had become a glowing red color, 1,000 fantasies rushing through her head. Well, I guess it's fine. The girl mumbled. The two inched ever closer to each other. XL tension filled the air as the two's lips began to interlock, and they began passionately, ouch. Saki's fantasy was interrupted by a shot painful sensation on the top of her head. Did he just eat one of her hairs? Why, how dash? The girl had plenty of questions, but Izuku just looked at her. What? I needed your din. What else would I have done? Izuku asked innocently, tilting his head to the side. You baka. She screamed, being the most embarrassed of her whole life. That was the first time Izuku had ever been slapped. The next day. Well, what quirk did you get? I bet it's really cool since it came from me. Asahi asked while jumping up and down, not unlike a little girl getting a new puppy. Quirk, skin shot. Sorry, but it's as gross as it sounds. You can detach parts of your skin and shoot it off at high speeds. Unlike the original quirk, you can shape your projectiles before you fire it. Luckily due to this, your skin passively regenerates at super speeds. But they can't all be powerful. Izuku thought aloud to himself as he processed all of this information. This caused Asahi to become worried. What's wrong with my quirk? Izuku explained the quirk to her and she seemed to share his disgust. How the F does this come from my quirk? Well, you create your own ammunition, so it wouldn't be surprising if you made them from dead skin cells. Izuku analyzed. Saki inched away from the greenette. Have you been watching me? She asked suspiciously. Nananoi uvigo title rongajustrialilica quirk sandorzus realikaland dash. Izuku was flustered by this accusation and dumped his brain out in words. Dude, chill, it's fine. She said calmly. It's funny how you geek out over quirks and stuff. Izuku visibly relaxed at this. Anyway, class is about to start, she said as the teacher walked in. 3 months later. So far Izuku had hit a plateau with his quirks. His orbit had reached 40 meters, he could create twice as much slime, his skin was as hard as iron and he could cover 32% of his body. He could now amplify his body by 1.46x. He had made a minimal effort with his skin shot quirk as he didn't see the point if he couldn't use it for hero work. He still used it to see the capabilities but tried to not use up his other quirk's training time with it. So far he had discovered he could regenerate all of the skin on his hand in under 3 seconds and he could fire it off at around 50 miles per hour. It would be useful, but due to skin's fleshy nature, it didn't have much, any, attack power. His quirk storage had increased by 4 and was resting at a comfortable 12 quirks, far from Izuku's current amount of quirks. Izuku was currently sitting on the floor of the quirk gym, having just put a massive dent in the wall due to his repeated punches in an attempt to strengthen his hardening. He noticed that his hardening seemed to chip far more than Ijiro's. The shards were quite sharp. Ijiro had learnt this once he had tried to pick up one of Izuku's shards, which had led to an ER trip and a lot of stitches. Izuku shuddered at the memory. He had never seen so much blood come from one hand. "Hey Izubro, can I ask you something?" Ijiro interrupted Izuku's train of thought. "Yeah, sure." Taking a swig of his water, he looked up at the taller boy. "Since you can amplify your processing speed using kinetic store," he began, "can you amplify your other quirks? They are also part of your body." Izuku was a moron. How had he not managed to think of this sooner? He was meant to be a quirk geek. He had watched thousands of videos of heroes doing combo moves and mixing their quirks to create a certain effect. How had this not crossed his mind? I don't know, I've never tried it." Ijiro just stared at him slack-jawed. Izuku stood up and put his hardening all over his arms, head and pectoral muscles, maxing out the output of his 32% hardening. He then activated kinetic store on his hardening quirk and briefly, his hardened skin spread to around 40% of his body. His obsidian also seemed to be more the strength of steel rather than iron. This development sent Izuku off on a muttering storm. This was until he began to feel a strain on the hardened sections of his body as if he had just kept it active for over a day with no breaks. Quickly deactivating both quirks, Ijiro adopted a face of worry. "Hey, are you okay? You were doing it," he queried. "I'm fine. I think that my quirk wasn't prepared to be boosted to that extent. Maybe I should try to keep it at lower levels instead of just 100% all the time," Izuku explained. "Well, that's good. You had me worried for a sec." Ijiro sighed in relief. "Well, I'm gonna head out. See you at school." He waved to Izuku, who was still on the floor with a thinking face. "Oh, bye." Izuku waved back, startled by his friend's sudden exit. He hadn't been listening. Izuku stood up to leave with his mind still whirring with possible uses for this new power. That was until he decided to do one last test. Turning to one of the target dummies, Izuku hardened his palm, slowly covering it in an inky black shine. Then he used Skin Shot, detaching the hardened skin and firing it at the humanoid figure's head, completely shredding the right side of its face and piercing right through to the other side. Izuku was amazed. Those dummies were made of reinforced carbon fiber and not even a bullet could get through them. Yet he had just managed to practically slice its face off. A shiver traveled up his spine when he imagined if he used that on a person. He informed a staff member of the broken dummy, who would have not believed him if not for the chunk he had brought with him, and hastily left before they could charge him for property damage. "Not bad. That was pretty clever," Y remarked. He had begun speaking in multiple sentences since their chat. He had also become even more frequent than last time, occasionally giving him pointers on how to use a quirk more effectively or keep him motivated during his workouts when he wanted to die. It was pleasant to have a voice in your corner to help you out, even if he would sound schizophrenic if he ever told anyone about him. 2 months later, Izuku was currently dragging a washing machine to the scrapyard while being cheered on by Mr. Yagi. "Go Midoriya, my boy. You can do it." The man was shouting. "Go Izuku, pull as hard as you can." Y simultaneously cheered. With one final heave, the boy managed to get it into the scrapyard and fell to the floor exhausted from the torture he had inflicted on himself. For the past 3 months, Mr. Yagi had begun watching him train and telling him how to do certain exercises. At this point, the two were teacher and student. Yagi said that he used to be a personal trainer but, after an injury, hung up the profession. As the two headed back to the beach, Izuku looked at his work so far and was proud of himself. Over the past 7 months, he had managed to transform the beach from a pseudo-landfill into a decently clean area, with only the odd piece of trash lying around. All things considered, he could probably finish the project by the end of the week. "Midoriya, I forgot to ask, what is your quirk? Toshinori asked. Izuku wasn't scared to tell Mr. Yagi about his quirk. The man himself was quirkless and didn't seem to have a prejudice bone in his body. My quirk is called inheritance. It allows me to permanently copy someone else's quirk if I consume some of their DNA, but if take too many quirks at once I can die. Yagi's eyes seemed to light up with interest once he heard his quirk. That is quite the interesting quirk you have. It reminds me of my friend's quirk, he said with a smile while scratching the back of his head. Really? The doctor said. This was one of the rarest quirks she had ever seen, so I'm quite surprised you know someone else with a similar one. Izuku stated nonchalantly, still staring at the beach. Did you mean what you said when we first met? Yagi asked, a burning determination in his eye. Yes, with my whole heart. I'm going to become a hero who protects the weak, and no one is going to stop me. He said, looking back to his friend, matching his determination easily. Very well, go here after you have finished your training. You could say I have a reward for you, the man said, then turning around and walking away. The week flew by as fast as lightning. It was fairly easy to haul the last few pieces of garbage to the scrapyard, seeming as though they were just small pieces of refrigerator. Izuku had made his way to the spot Mr. Yagi had selected for his surprise reward. Although the boy highly respected Mr. Yagi, he had to admit this was a bit far for a reward. Young Midoriya, Yagi shouted as he rounded the corner. I'm sorry if I kept you waiting. I was having some work-related issues, he explained, scratching the back of his head. Izuku greeted the man with a warm smile. No, I actually only just got here. I see, well, on to business, he said, coughing into his hand. Well done on clearing the beach. I have to commend you for such a feat in such little time, but unfortunately, I have not been fully honest with you. Izuku was surprised to hear that the man he held so highly would lie to him. I have never been a personal trainer, and I certainly have a quirk. You see, I am All Might, he said, buffing up to the 7'2" man's form. Izuku squeaked. But how? The boy floundered around with a face like a fish. Around 5 years ago I got this injury, he said, lifting his shirt to show his gnarled flesh. Izuku reeled from the sight. The fight was never televised, but the villain possessed many quirks which he had taken from others. His power emerged at the dawn of quirks, and using a copious amount of longevity quirks, he has survived until that fight. What many don't know is that he had a sickly younger brother, who was quirkless yet had a strong sense of justice. Not wanting a weakling brother, this villain forced a quirk onto him, the ability to stockpile power over their lifetime. Izuku was on the edge of his metaphorical seat. But Mr. Yagi, or All Might he should say, continued. His brother did have a quirk, the power to pass on his quirk. The two quirks fused, creating the power to stockpile power and then pass it on to the next generation. This power was dubbed. All Might raised his palm, a glowing light flowing from it. One for all, both Y and Yagi said at the same time, and I want you to be its next wielder. The man finished. Are you sure you want me? I mean, there are hundreds of strong heroes you could give this to. So why me? Izuku was a bit doubtful of his capabilities. In his mind, there was no way he deserved All Might's power. Although there are hundreds of strong heroes, you were the only one helping the community on that beach. I am choosing you because of your selflessness and willingness to help others, not power. All Might explained. Izuku had made up his mind. Although he still had doubts, he wasn't going to argue with the number one hero. I accept your power, he said, determination filling his very being. That's good to hear, Mr. Yagi grinned. Now eat this, he said, pulling a strand of hair and moving it into Izuku's face. Saki sat at the cafe she had agreed to meet Midoriya at, taking a sip of her tea to calm her nerves. The green-haired boy was nearly 15 minutes late and hadn't called or texted to say where he was, and her insecurities were getting the best of her. He's bailed on me, she thought. The girl had asked him out, not like that, on a whim, and he had very reluctantly given her his number. She knew he was a social pariah, but she didn't know it was self-inflicted. As Saki was about to get up and leave, she heard the jingle of the door and saw a familiar face. Asahi. Sorry I'm late, I was training and I lost track of time. Izuku apologized profusely, bowing so far he almost touched his feet. It's no problem, really. I just got here. The girl lied, looking away from the boy. Izuku picked up on this immediately. You liar, you have finished your drink. The boy's deduction skills were beyond human. Saki was sure even detectives would have a challenge if they tried to compete with him. Alright, I got here 20 minutes ago, but that's fine because you still came. She flashed him a smile, causing his cheeks to burn red. Izuku ordered some green tea and Saki ordered a latte. So, which hero school do you plan on attending? Asahi asked. Well, I plan on becoming the #1 hero someday, so I'm aiming for UA. But if I can't get in, I'll probably shoot for Isamu or Ketsubutsu. Izuku answered, rubbing his chin in thought. Damen, that's a pretty big dream. I plan to go to UA too, but not to become #1 or something like that. I want to be like Lady Nagant. Izuku swore he could see stars in the girl's eyes as she said this. Izuku nodded as he spoke. With your quirk, you could probably become exactly like her. If you can better your aim, you could become a living sniper rifle, but please try to not kill anyone. Yeah, that would probably end my hero career pretty quickly. She chuckled, taking the final sip of her drink. Well, where should we go next? Izuku asked, seeing as they had both finished their drinks. I don't know, maybe the park? There's supposed to be a free concert happening there. The two paid for their drinks and began to walk for the door. Izuku decided to be a gentleman and hold the door open for Asahi, although he was bright red as he did. After you, he stuttered, allowing the girl to pass. Good job, kid, you'll get to first base in no time at this rate. A woman's voice chuckled in his head. Shut up. I'm being nice. Izuku weakly defended. Wait, you're not, was the last thing the boy thought before passing out. Hey kid. Wake up. Izuku opened his eyes to see a bald man slapping his cheek. Alarmed by the sight, he swiftly crawled back out of fear, noticing there were 7 more people, one of which was Who are you people? Why are you in my void? He cautiously asked, making sure to stay far away from them. Izuku calmed down. Y spoke up with irritation in his voice. No. There are 7 strangers in my mind. Izuku rightfully argued. He's got a point there, Yoichi. A man with black hair and a high-collared shirt defended him. You aren't helping N. The woman in the group scolded N, as he was called. My name is Okada Yamaguchi, it's a pleasure to meet you. A man with spiky pink hair introduced himself. Hey, you don't get to introduce yourself first. You were the most opposed to Toshinori, giving him one for all. The bald man shouted while pointing accusingly at Okada. It's not my fault you took so long. The man only got shouting in return for his response. Everyone shut up. Izuku shouted, gaining the attention of the whole group. Please explain why you are here and then introduce yourselves. He ordered, gaining a snort from Y, or Yoichi as N had called him. Well, Izuku, these people are a part of One for All, the quirk I created over 200 years ago. They are all previous users of the power. Yagi is also here. He said as a yellow figure waved at him. They will introduce themselves by order of user, starting from the second as you have. Already met me? He directed as the others got into a line. As I said earlier, I'm Okada Yamaguchi, my meta ability is called Gear Shift. He said, seeming annoyed. A man with blue hair tied back into a ponytail stepped up. I am Endo Hayashi, my meta ability is called FA Gene. Next up was a tall man with white hair and a large scar running down his face. Greetings, my name is Hikage Shinomori, and my meta ability is called Danger Sense. I am sorry for the intrusion. He said politely. The bald man stepped forward, a grin on his face. Daigoro Banjo, Pro Hero Lariat, my quirk's called Black W. Don't mind these geezers, they were from a time before quirks were called quirks. He said, pointing a thumb to the other 3, getting a few annoyed looks. My name is N Suzuki, and my quirk is Smoke Screen, N said while trying to ignore Daigoro, who was currently trying to hit one of his predecessors. And finally, best until last, the woman confidently stepped up. Me. Nana Shimura. My quirk is called Float. Try not to fall in love with me too quickly. She ended with a wink. You look too much like my mom, and Mr. Yagi is last, Izuku commented flatly, causing a tick to appear on Nana's head. I'm starting to dislike this kid, she said, rage brimming in her voice. Yagi, unfortunately, can't speak as he didn't have a quirk for one for all to store, thus only part of his consciousness is here, Yoichi informed Izuku. Thank you for sorting that. So why am I here? Izuku questioned Yoichi. Well, you see, when you ate Toshinori's hair, your quirk also activated during the transferal of one for all. And because of the sludge incident, you already gained kinetic store from the stockpile quirk, which means that you have processed 7 separate quirks. Yoichi explained. Because of the stamina drain of your quirk, you got 7 quirks worth of fatigue at once and immediately passed out. But I was out with Asahi. What if we missed the concert? Izuku asked, concerned. Kid, you passed out on the street. You are probably in an ambulance. En pointed out, making Izuku snap back to the reality of the situation. Anyways, Yoichi began, interrupting the little conversation the two were having. You're waking up now, so make sure to check your new quirks. He said as they began to fade. Have fun with your girlfriend. Nana shouted right before he woke up. She's not my girlfriend. Izuku shouted as he lurched up in the ambulance, almost causing the driver to crash and headbutting Asahi as she was leaning over him. Jesus, broccoli head. You're awake. Asahi shouted as she rubbed her head. And who's your girlfriend? She asked, a hint of jealousy in her voice. And no one, he squeaked, clamping his hands over his point of impact from Asahi's face. Well, whatever, she cared. Why did you pass out like that? You were fine a minute earlier, then you were face down on the pavement. She said while waving her hands around. I think it might have been my quirk, Izuku said without thinking of the consequences. Did you copy someone else's quirk? She asked, tilting her head to the side. Izuku had to think up a lie on the fly. He already couldn't lie and now he had seconds to. Well, you see. Izuku began, not knowing how to continue. I think it was the cups. He said in a brain splurge while trying to think of a good excuse. The cups? Are you okay in the head, dude? She questioned, thinking he may be having side effects of passing out. Yeah. Because they have other people's DNA on them. Finally, a good lie. That makes sense, I guess. She skeptically. Have you checked yet? She asked. No, I've been talking to you. Izuku once again responded flatly. Well, check then. She shouted, annoyed at his smartassery. Okay, but calm down. Izuku said, trying to quell some of his friend's anger. Quirk, gear shift. This quirk allows the user to alter the speed of anything you touch, allowing you to accelerate the force of the target. You increase speed in gears. Gear 1 gives a 10% boost and higher gears increase by 10% each time. The quirk uses up stamina, which also increases per gear. You can only use up to gear 1 for now. Strengthening of quirk, gear shift, emitter type quirk, branch off manipulation quirk. Quirk, float impact. This quirk allows the user to make anything in a certain area begin to float if the user impacts the floor. The strength of the impact affects the area and floating power. Fusion between quirk, FA gene and quirk, float, emitter type quirk. Quirk, sixth sense. This quirk allows the user to be able to sense anything in a certain area constantly. This quirk is passive and cannot be shut off, but you can sense even the twitch of a muscle without looking. The quirk will activate in 12 hours. Mutation and strengthening of quirk, danger sense, emitter type quirk, branch off sensory quirk. Quirk, smoke. This quirk allows the user to transform into smoke and then manipulate said smoke as if it were part of them. The user has a time limit on how long they can transform for and is immune to the negative effects of smoke on the body. Type change of quirk, smoke screen, transformation type quirk. Quirk, blackened. This quirk allows the user to sprout shadow-like arms and hands from their body. These appendages are hard to control and react to the user's emotions. You can also only make a certain amount of them and, for now, have the strength of the user but size can vary. Mutation of quirk, black whip, emitter type quirk. Quirk, big guns. The quirk, Transferal picked up the traits of the most recent one for all user, Toshinori Yagi, making the user taller and more muscular than the average person, meaning you are slightly stronger than normal. This change will take place in 12 hours and will be extremely painful. Mutation of quirk, transference, mutation type quirk. Izuku told Asahi about all of these quirks, excluding the one for all details. And she seemed to have blue-screened at the information, sensory overload perhaps. It didn't matter. What did matter was Izuku's lack of clothes for this. What if he went from his 5'3" to 5'7"? He would have no clothes. Asahi! He shouted with a worried tone. Why yeah, she hadn't expected the authority in his voice. I need. He began, his face darkening. I need you to go shopping with me. Izuku pleaded. Huh. Quirk's glossary. Inheritance, fused with Quirk Viewer, Gearshift. Slime Okinesis, Float Impact. Kinetic Stockpile, 1.67x, 6th sense. Orbit, Smoke. Hardening 32%, Black Hand. Skin Shot Big Guns. Chapter 5. Exam Season. Izuku walked through the front door of his house with Asahi in tow, both carrying around 5 bags in each arm. Izuku welcome ho dash. Inko stopped mid-sentence. Who is this young woman you have brought home with you? She said, a sly glint in her eye. And nice to meet you Mrs. Midoriya. Sorry F for the eye intrusion. Asahi shakily greeted the woman, the weight of the bags crushing her. My name is Saki Asahi. Oh please call me Inko. And allow my son to carry your bags for you. Inko effortlessly lifted all of the bags and dropped them into poor Izuku's arms, almost causing the boy to snap in half if not for the use of kinetic store at the last second. Asahi, where have I heard that name before? The woman wondered aloud while handing Asahi a cup of tea. Well you see, I'm kinda the girl who shot Midoriya. The girl admitted she had managed to come to terms with that fact a few months back with help from Izuku. He said he didn't mind. Immediately froze. I beg your pardon? Izuku then walked into the room, his cheery attitude immediately changing the dire situation. Hey, so Mom? Izuku said in a soothing tone as if trying not to awaken a dragon. I went to a cafe with Asahi today, and I accidentally absorbed 7 quirks and passed out. Izuku could already see the panic spread across Inko's face and tried to salvage the situation. But it's okay. Asahi called an ambulance for me and helped me shop for new clothes because I got a mutation quirk. Oh that's fine, everything is fine, Izuku is fine. Inko psychotically whispered to herself. Izuku slowly inched away from the livid woman. Izuku, honey, could you please go put the cups away in the kitchen please? It was more of a demand than a request, and the boy did as she was told. As Izuku walked off into the kitchen, Inko leaned in so that only Asahi could hear her. I will allow you to continue to see Izuku since you saved him by calling the ambulance, but if you ever pull another stunt like the gunshot again, I will personally make sure you never become a hero. Asahi didn't know that she was a nurse and probably couldn't stop her from becoming a hero, but it was about sending a message. So, Asahi, you will need to go home soon, huh? Inko said, far louder, returning to her previous cheery persona. It's getting pretty late, you don't want to get caught out in the dark. She said quickly, ushering her to the door. Oh well, I'm sorry for intruding. And thank you for the tea, she said as she was pushed out of the door by Inko. It was really no problem, and thank you for helping me shop for clothes. Izuku held the door open against his mother's wishes and her upper body strength. See you later, he shouted after her, releasing his grip on the door and allowing his mother to slam the door. Huffing and heaving, Inko looked up at her son, a puzzled look on her face. Did you like her? Izuku asked, causing his mother to go on a rant about why she wanted to punch that little beach, Inko's words, in the face. Izuku awoke to a roiling pain in his flesh, as if his muscles were being ripped apart and sewed back together. The pain spread from his muscles into his bones, he could feel them crack and splinter, being pulled further and further apart, only for them to be reconnected and the process to begin again. He wasn't sure he could take much more of this pain, but at the same time, he couldn't pass out from the pain. It was a vicious siu, and the boy was sure he was in hell from the amount of pain he was experiencing and wondered what god he had offended to suffer this torment. Slowly the pain began to fade, and by the time he had managed to drift back off to sleep it had progressed into a dull pain across his body. The next morning, Izuku woke up to the sound of his alarm ringing in his ear. Yawning, the boy stretched his arms out, getting a satisfying popping noise, and groggily stumbled his way into the bathroom to brush his teeth. Reaching for the door handle, Izuku used the same force he usually would to open his bedroom door. Except, unlike usual, he took the door off its hinges. Oh shit! Izuku thought, if his mother ever found out about this she would kill him. After collecting all of the things he would need that day from his room, Izuku used his newfound height and strength to place the door back into place and sealing it in place with some cemented slime. He quickly brushed his teeth and headed down to the Quirk gym after shooting Mr. Yagi a text message. As he got on the train, Izuku questioned the other users on their quirks in case they had any notes that could be useful. He could already feel his sixth sense working away and tried not to think about all of the naked bodies he could see right now. It also turns out that Black Hand can be activated on impulse, much like how Slimokinesis first activated. Squaring up to the test dummy, Izuku decided to test his quirks in user order, starting with big guns. From what he had recorded, he went from being able to bench press 102 kilograms to being able to bench 146 kilograms, which, although not superhuman, was a drastic increase. He had also noticed that his physique had also changed. He went from the beginnings of a 6-pack to a very noticeable 10-pack. Izuku hypothesized that this may be a cause of All Might's prime form, which had at least an 8-pack from what his costume revealed. Izuku then swung his fist at the test dummy's head, a loud thunk coming from the impact. Ow ow! Ow 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 ow! Izuku clutched his fist in pain. He should have hardened his fist before punching. Although his fist hurt like hell, he did manage to knock the dummy back a few inches, seeing as they weighed the same as a fully stocked refrigerator. Next was gear shift. The quirk said that anything he touches can be affected by his quirk. He would think that Newton's first law will be a large barrier for his quirk. Picking up a rock from the floor using orbit and throwing it at the test dummy, he then repeated this but activated Gear 1 on the rock. The results were minimal and Izuku decided it would be best to move on. The next quirk was Float Impact. Izuku got 3 balls of varying weights, 5 kilograms to 10 kilograms, 20 kilograms, and placed them in a line. He then hardened his fist and brought his fist down to the floor, creating a small crater. The 5 kilograms ball shot into the air the quickest and stayed about 2 meters in the air. The 10 kilograms ball floated about 1.5 meters in the air and reached it at a medium pace. The 20 kilograms ball was the slowest at raising and only floated about 1 meter in the air. After further testing, Izuku found out that he could climb on the ball and hang off of them without them falling out of the sky. He could move them horizontally, and he could cancel the effect whenever. But he couldn't use the quirk on himself, and although he could control how high the ball would go, a ball couldn't go past its original maximum height. For sixth sense, Izuku got a tennis ball launcher on a track that would fire towards him. He then blindfolded himself and tried to dodge the tennis ball. Izuku had managed to dodge around 1/6 of the ball fired at him. The main problem was that he didn't have enough time to process where the ball was coming from. Smoke was the most interesting quirk he had ever used. It allowed him to transform his whole body or parts of his body into smoke which he could control. The sensation of being air was amazing. Although it was extremely slow, he could fly. He could also phase through physical attacks by turning into smoke right before he got hit. Unfortunately, this did not extend to his clothes. Finally, there was Black Hand. The hands individually had the strength of his normal arms. He could produce 4 extra arms, and he could combine them to make bigger and stronger arms. The arms could extend out to around 50 meters. Just so you know, Izuku, you have no free quirk slots. What? Izuku shouted, gaining the attention of most of the gym. Better get training, kid. Daigoro chuckled, earning a groan from Izuku. Day of the UA exams. Izuku stared at the giant gates of the prestigious Hero Academy with stars in his eyes. This was the next step of his life and the start of his heroic future. Ironically, the first step he took had him plummeting towards the concrete. Well, guess I'll just die. He thought as the pavement got ever closer, the boy had managed to lose all hope in the first 5 seconds of entering UA's premises. That was until Izuku felt the earth's pull on him. Vanish and a small hand grab his shoulder. "Hey, are you okay?" A cheery voice asked him. Sadly, Izuku's severe lack of social experience meant he was practically unable to respond. The only reason he had managed to befriend anyone was because of Ijiro. Even then it was only really Ashido he had become friends with. Asahi was an anomaly to this, however. He had managed to create a friendship with her despite her clear hatred for him at the start. Thanks. He managed to stutter out. It seems his social skills had deteriorated worse than he thought. "Sorry for using my quirk on you. I thought you probably wouldn't want to fall before the exam." She chuckled to the still catatonic Izuku. "Well, I guess I should get going, don't want to be late. See you later." She waved as she walked away, and Izuku just stared after her. It took the boy a minute to snap out of his stupor with En reminding him about the exam. As he ran into the exam hall, he seated himself next to those in his school who had also decided to do the exams. Out of the 280 students in his grade at school, around 40 of them were opting to go to UA, about 25 on the hero track, which was far higher than Aldera, which just had Bakugo. Sitting down, Izuku was just reading through the pamphlet on the hero exam. It said the usual stuff that you would expect to see, like the cutoff score was usually around 30 and that villain points were awarded differently depending on which type of villain he defeated. He then saw some not-so-usual things in there, such as severe injury is a possibility and death has occurred in the past. So that was encouraging. The boy was shaken out of his morbid discovery by a tap on his shoulder. "Hey Midoriya." Ashido greeted enthusiastically. "I didn't know you were taking the exams," she said, sitting down next to him. "Oh, yeah I am, but I'm not very confident I'll get in," he explained with a shy look. He may have a lot of quirks, but he hasn't had much time to train them compared to everyone else who had years to train with and strengthen them. This was in addition to the fact UA had one of the hardest entrance exams on Earth that even the strongest of applicants had trouble with. Izuku's chances were looking pretty grim. "I'm sure you'll do great." She gave a supportive thumbs up. "What makes you think you won't? Is it your quirk?" As soon as the girl said this, she gained an inquisitive look. "Now that I think about it, you've never told me what it was." This was true. Every time she asked, Ijiro just gave her a look that said, "Drop the subject." It wasn't that Izuku didn't like his quirk, but more like he was scared of her reaction. Izuku thought of a response. He might as well tell her. This would probably be one of the last times he ever spoke to her. "My quirk is called inheritance. It allows me to partially copy someone else's quirk permanently. Sadly, they start from scratch and need to be trained up from their weakest point," he explained to the pink girl, who had a thoughtful look on her face. "Yeah, that does sound like a pain. I can see why you never told me. If you just told anyone you could be in danger," she said, nodding her head and earning Izuku a confused look on his face. "You could become a lab rat like that kid in North Korea who got tested on because of being able to contain 2 quirks. That would be pretty bad." Ashido elaborated. Izuku's face changed from confused to worried in an instant. I was just scared of your reaction. I didn't even think about the possibility that if I had been more careless I could have taken and experimented on," he admitted to the girl, who feigned offense. "Come on Midoriya. Do you think so little of me that I would hate you just for your quirk? Mine makes me look like an alien." She laughed, gaining a chuckle from still a worrying Izuku. Suddenly the pro-hero snipe walked out onto the stage and a thick textbook-sized booklet came out of a hidden compartment on the desk. "The written portion of the test shall now begin," he said dully into the microphone. It was very clear he felt bad for the children. "Oh boy," Izuku thought as he looked at the novel of a test. This would hurt all 9 brains inside of his head. 2 hours later and they had finally finished the monster test. He hoped he had passed that section of the exam, seeing as he had the combined intellect of 9 people from the dawn of quirks. Now present Mike walked onto the stage, clearly happier he got to present this section of the exam. "Hey there little listeners," he screamed, not needing a microphone. "Are you ready to rock?" "Yeah." It was clear he was waiting for a response, which he never got. The only noise heard was from Izuku, who was rapidly spewing facts about the hero on stage. "Tough crowd. Mike said to himself. Anyway, in this exam you will be destroying robots. The types of robots give different points. There are 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers. Any questions? A singular boy put up his hand. Yes, examinee 7111. Mike shouted enthusiastically after getting his first piece of feedback. Mr. Mike, it clearly says on the pamphlet that there are 4 robots. If this is a misprint on the official pamphlet, UA should be ashamed. And you? He pointed right at Izuku. You have been speaking this entire time. If you are not taking this exam seriously, I suggest you go home. Izuku turned bright red and slapped a hand over his mouth. Thank you for your concern. You see, the 4th type of robot gives 0 points and is more of a gimmick to try and avoid. He answered, causing examinee 7111 to sit back down. He then began to explain the arenas and other small details of the exam, but Izuku was too busy thinking to listen. Ashido, the boy whispered to the girl. You should stay away from the 0-pointers, he hid them for a reason. He explained to her. And remember kids, hurting other applicants is a big no-no and will have you immediately disqualified. The man explained. I will end this presentation with our school motto, go out there and go beyond. Plus ultra. He shouted as students began to file out of the room. Izuku stared at the giant faux city in awe. He knew UA had a lot of money but not enough to build a small city. Hey kid, it's that girl who helped you. You should go thank her for the lack of a broken nose. Nana's vestige said, making an appearance. He had recently found out that the past users could appear before him in the real world. Daigoro liked to abuse this new power often. You're right, I should. Izuku had developed a habit of accidentally speaking out loud to the vestige, which just made him seem insane. The boy slowly made his way towards the girl, about to call out to her. He noticed someone was walking over to him. Oh no. Not him. Izuku thought as he turned around to see examinee 7111 reaching out to tap his shoulder. A bit startled at Izuku's precognition, the taller boy recoiled slightly before composing himself. Were you about to go and distract that girl there? Trying to get rid of the competition, are you? I shall not allow it. Examinee 7111 was a bit too intense for Izuku, whom was beginning to shut down from the leaps in logic. What? No, wwws. Izuku needed to get a hold on his stutter. Start! Mike shouted as the doors flew open. Huh! Izuku managed to squeak out before everyone else began running, without him. Activating kinetic store at 1.85x, the green-haired boy quickly began to catch up to the pack and he split off. Down a street to fight some villain bots. Spotting a 1-pointer, the boy used a combination of skin shot, hardening, and gear 4 to fire off one of his newest attacks, Black Bullet. He mentally screamed. The projectile quickly shredded through the machine's head, shutting it down instantly. 1 point. His victory was short-lived as he sensed 5 1-pointers, 3 2-pointers, and a 3-pointer heading straight for him. Using Orbit, he smashed 2 of the 1-pointers into each other, which in turn destroyed a 2-pointer. He then activated Gear Shift, Gear 2 on his whole body while using Kinetic Store and smashed his foot into the ground, causing the remaining 1-pointers to fly into the air. Using Black Hand, he grabbed onto a 1-pointer and launched himself into the air, barely avoiding a rocket from the 3-pointer. He shot 3 black bullets at the head and tail of the 2-pointer, which was shaped like a scorpion, and dropped the 3 1-pointers onto it, killing all 4 instantly. He kept himself afloat using his black hands and lowered himself to the ground. Now it was just him and the 3-pointer. Activating hardening up his arms and up to his knees on his legs, Izuku then activated Gear Shift, Gear 4 on himself and flattened his hands to become as knife-like as possible. What Izuku had discovered throughout his training was that his obsidian was far better at slicing than taking hits. Sure, he still trained to harden and could now become as hard as titanium, but now he trained in slicing. Izuku blasted off as fast as he could, using Impact Float as he ran to try and keep the 3-pointer from moving. He then swung his arm as hard as he could, slicing the 3-pointer almost in half. This shut down the final robot. Izuku slowed himself by firing out slime to attempt to lower his velocity. He still hit a wall but much softer. 13 points. He thought as he ran off looking for more prey. While running along the bow began to pick off any one-pointers he found with Black Bullet, he had almost been blown up by a rocket at one point if not for Sixth Sense and smoke. He had so far dispatched 6 one-pointers, 5 two-pointers and 2 three-pointers since his first battle, leaving him at 35 points. Though he was past the cutoff point, he needed a lot more points if he wanted to get into the top 30. As Izuku ran around, he noticed the very apparent lack of robots around, his concern growing ever more due to his lack of points. He was amazed he had managed to get this far, seeing as he expected to get less than 20, but he had heard a few people saying they had scores in the 50s. He checked his watch to see he had almost 2 minutes left on the exam. See? I need to step up my game. In the examination room. This year's batch seems quite promising, Hanizu. Midnight asked, not taking her eyes off of her screen. Indeed, the creature began. Some rely on their information-gathering skills to track down their targets, whereas others use their speed to get ahead of their competition. Of course, raw destructive power is also a good ability to have. The mammalian squeaked. The most successful applicants have a mixture of all of these features. Well, the real test is yet to come, an examiner said as he pushed a large red button. Izuku had managed to destroy 3 one-pointers before he felt rumbling beneath his feet. Several buildings crumbled around him as a ginormous figure rose from the ground. The machine had a huge 0 painted on the side, pretty big for just a gimmick. Endo said with a worried tone. It seemed that Izuku had been correct in his hypothesis about the 0-pointer, though he doubted it would be to this extreme. I need to get out of here and get more points, he thought to himself as he turned to run. Ow! A high voice cried, gaining Izuku's attention. He watched in horror as the robot loomed ever nearer, its treads crushing anything in its path. Without even thinking, the boy's body ran back to the girl as fast as he could, reaching her in less than 3 seconds. Using his enhanced body and black hand, the boy lugged the boulder that was trapping the girl, all the while Sixth Sense continued to warn him of his impending doom. "CC, can you move?" he shakily asked the girl. "No, I think I broke my ankle," she said, rubbing her ankle. Izuku then used Black Hand to create a makeshift stretcher for her and used that to transport her while he ran as fast as he could away from the giant threat. "End time!" Present Mike shouted. Izuku collapsed from exhaustion after using Gear 4 for so long. "Excuse me, young man, but are you going to get up? The exam has ended." A slightly aggravated voice asked. Oh yeah, sorry." Izuku stammered, standing up to face the woman. "It's all right, are you hurt?" Recovery Girl smiled. "No, I'm fine, thank you," he said, mentally fanboying over the heroine he was next to. "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. It's Recovery Girl," he mentally screamed. "Well, that's good," she said, handing him some gummies. "Eat these to regain your energy and make sure you get a good night's rest and you should be fine," she instructed the hero otaku before moving on to another examinee. 1 week later, Izuku knew he had bombed that exam. He had only managed to get 39 points. That surely wasn't enough to get in. He expected people with scores around 60 to get in, and he was over 20 points away from that. He poked at his fish as he had this self-scolding, gaining the interest of his mother. "Izuku, are you okay? Do I need to be worried?" she asked, distressed. Huh. He was snapped out of his thoughts by this. "Oh no, I'm fine, just thinking about the exam is all." He partially lied. Inko seemed to pick up on this. "Izuku, I want you to know that even if you don't get in, you are still a hero in my eyes," she said reassuringly to her son. Just then Izuku sensed someone walk up to the front door and rush to it. He had been doing this all week in case it was from Yue. This time, however, it paid off. "It's here," he shouted as he ran back to the living room/dining room/kitchen, not being able to contain his nervousness. "What? Quickly bring it in here," she said, quickly rushing to clear the table so they could both read the letter. Reaching the table, Izuku ripped open the envelope only for a small disc to fall out onto the table with a clink. The disc then lit up with a blue light as a hologram appeared above it. "Hello, Mr. Midoriya, how have you been? Don't answer that, this is a pre-recorded message," a voice squeaked. I am Principal Nizu of UA Academy and have sent this letter to inform you of your performance in the entrance exam. In the written portion of the exam, you scored an impressive 87%, which is the 6th highest in the entire exam. Good job. Nizu said encouragingly, possibly to soften the letdown of what he said next. Next is the hero exam. He began, a screen popping up behind him which showed the highlights of Izuku fighting. You managed to score 39 villain points. Unfortunately, that isn't enough points to pass. Izuku felt tears well up in his eyes. All of that training was wasted. He would need to give one for all back to All Might. If that was all we counted. Nizu continued. What kind of hero academy would we be if we didn't accept those who run headfirst into danger to save someone in need? A video of Izuku saving the nice girl played in the background. Due to saving that girl, you have been awarded 19 rescue points, leaving you at 58 points in total and 9th place overall in the exam. Nizu revealed, causing Inko to burst into tears of joy. Welcome to your hero academia, he said as the video shut off, and now both Midoriyas were in tears. I did it, Mom. Izuku sobbed, smiling at his mother. I'm gonna be a hero. The boy's attitude was infectious and Inko found herself as excited as him. You will. You will become a hero. After a few minutes of crying, the two checked the envelope inside to see the details of where to get his uniform and submit his costume design. Wait, costume? Oh, CRP. The boy thought as he rushed to get a pen and paper. He needed to get a costume designed by the end of the week. He knew little features he wanted, like a knife and the materials needed to be able to transform with him, but other than that he had no idea. He needed to get this designed, and fast. Quirk Glossary. Inheritance, fused with Quirk Viewer, Gearshift, Gear 4. Slime Okinesis, Float Impact. Kinetic Stockpile, 1.89x, 6th sense, 50 meters. Orbit, Smoke. Hardening 42%, Black Hand. Skin Shot Big Guns. Chapter 6. Survival of the Fittest. Walking through the halls of UA, Izuku keenly searched for Class 1A. Sadly, 6th sense was useless in this situation as it couldn't detect what was said on any of the doors. Thus he aimlessly wandered the halls, hopelessly searching for his homeroom. Hey, do you need some help? A lively voice called out to him. Izuku turned to see his saver, seeing a boy just a few inches taller than him with blonde hair and a bright smile. The first-year classrooms are over there. I'm assuming you are a newbie seeing as you have no clue where you are going. The boy laughed while pointing in the opposite direction to where Izuku was headed. Well, I hope to see you again soon, see ya? He said, walking off to his respective classroom. As Izuku approached the first-year area feeling like his stomach was fighting an anaconda, what were his classmates like? Was Ijiro there? Did his tie look stupid? Would he get made fun of here too? Would he get shot again? All of which were questions that continued to swirl through the boy's mind as he approached the door of Class 1A. As he neared the room, however, Izuku's heart sank from what 6th sense told him. Izuku reached for the handle of the comically large door and tried to sneak in without being noticed. He entered the room only to see Katsuki Bakuga bickering with examinee. Get your feet off of the desk. You are insulting our seniors who worked on them previously, the woodworkers who crafted them, and this entire school as a whole. The taller boy demanded, getting a snarl in return. And who are you to tell me what to do, for eyes? Bakugu questioned, only for the recipient to bow in front of him and introduce himself. My name is Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. Now please, take your feet off that desk at once. He continued to plead. So Semi shoved that stick up your butt? I'll make sure I get it out when I blow you to bits. Katsuki cackled as Ida continued to reprimand him. Izuku used this chance to slink away to his seat, but seeing as they were the only three in the room apart from a girl with a spiky ponytail at the back of the room, it was hard not to get seen by at least someone. As the boy sat down, the girl behind him spoke up. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. It's a pleasure to meet you. She introduced herself with a warm smile and outstretched a hand for him to shake. Such a sudden confrontation with such a appealing girl had left Izuku very startled, to say the least. Hello. My name is Azumidoriya. He was cut off by an explosion to the desk which he had overlooked being distracted by Yaoyorozu. How the hell did you get in Dorobo? Bakugo interrogated the boy, venom dripping from his voice. Izuku may have been taller than him now, but that didn't stop him from being just as threatening. I bet you cheated, huh? He growled with sparks popping in his palms. Hey! Get away from him! Ijiro came to the rescue, running through the door and getting between the two boys, rocking a new spiked red hair look. Yaoyorozu checked on Izuku to see if he was alright. He was on the verge of tears. The two boys looked ready to fight there inside the classroom. Out of my way extra, before I turn you to ash. You don't know Dorobo's quirk, he's a villain. I know him. No, he's not, you a-hole. Kirishima defended his friend valiantly, not that it meant anything to the Pomeranian. Please, could you take this conflict outside? We can resolve this civilly. Ida shouted, trying to usher the two boys out of the room in case there was a physical altercation. Are you okay? Yorozu softly asked Izuku, rubbing circles on his back to try and help him calm down. Izuku sniffled and wiped the tears that were threatening to spill. I just need a minute. The boy took out his notebook to try and occupy himself until the start of the lesson, occasionally looking up to see someone walk through the door. Yo, Midoriya. Ashido greeted, walking up to Izuku's desk. Why is Kiri trying to fight some blonde? She asked, leaning on his desk. Oh, well, he said something that he didn't like. He said he wasn't exactly lying, but he was missing out on some vital information. Next to walk in was Asahi, who he gave a slight wave to. She may have had a fever because she went bright red and immediately averted her gaze from him for some odd reason. And now they were just missing 4 students and the teacher, who was nowhere to be seen. Next in was the girl he saved from the 0-pointer during the exam. She seemed to light up when she saw him. Hey you broccoli head, the girl said while running over to him, oblivious to Asahi, who was burning holes into the girl's back with the glare she was sending her. I never got to thank you for saving me. You were so cool. You were like, can you stand? And when I couldn't, you picked me up like a damsel in distress. She said, rather loudly, to the boy who seemed to be overloading by the amount of information. It seemed that the girl had unleashed a monster she hadn't yet realized was in the room. Asahi strolled up to Izuku's desk. She held so much murderous aura that she could kill someone by looking at them for too long. Who is this girl you are talking to, Izuku? She used his first name. He knew she was said, but why? Hey Asahi, this is a girl I saved during the exam. Her name is... Izuku had completely forgotten to ask for the girl's name. How could he be so rude? Hello. I'm Ochako Uraraka. It's a pleasure to meet you. She bowed, managing to match the girl's overwhelming hatred with something far stronger, mischief. I hope we can become great friends. She said with a grin. Name's Saki Asahi, she said, flipping her hair and walking back to her desk, clearly jealous of the brown-haired girl, but Izuku couldn't figure out why. Soon after the confrontation, a shaggy-haired man with a gray scarf walked in with Ida, Kirishima, and Bakugo in tow. I want to make this very clear, I don't care if you don't like each other. But please try not to attack each other in the hallway over a disagreement. The man tiredly explained to the boys as they walked in. Everyone go put one of these on and meet me outside on the field. He said to the class, dumping some gym uniforms onto a desk. But Mr. Uraraka spoke out. Aizawa. The man introduced himself flatly. But Mr. Aizawa, what about orientation? She continued, unperturbed. At UA we have free rein to teach however we want to, meaning I don't have to make you go to menial things like orientation. He silenced the whole class and walked out of the room. The rest of the class decided to just go along with it and made their way to the changing rooms. As they got changed, the boys idly chatted about random things. Hey you, Cabbage Patch. A boy he learnt was called Kaminari called out to him. I noticed you looked towards the door before it was even opened. What's up with that? He asked. Oh, my quirk is called Sixth Sense. I can sense everything in a 54-meter radius of me, Izuku explained, once again withholding a bit of information so he doesn't become a social pariah again. Ijiro flashed him a knowing look before returning to putting on his gym uniform. Wow, that sounds super useful. Is it on right now? Kaminari said with a pervy grin. Izuku turned bright red and looked away. I can't turn it off. He admitted meekly, not making eye contact with the other boys. Really? That was just a joke. He giggled to himself. How detailed is it? He was pummeling Izuku with questions now. I can tell you your BPM without looking at you. That really shocked Kaminari. I think we are going to be great friends. He smiled devilishly as he said this, though he did seem genuine. After getting ready, the boys walked to the training field as Aizawa instructed. Kaminari decided to make some light banter with Izuku. So Midoriya, what is it like perving on every girl in 50 meters of you? He quite possibly said this a bit too loud, seeing as most of the girls were within earshot of them. What? Asahi cried, getting the attention of the mandem. Izuku and Kaminari's faces dropped as they saw a group of flustered and angry girls walking towards them. Midoriya, I am so sorry, I will try to fix this. The blonde-haired boy whispered to his friend apologetically. Hey, listen, it was just a joke, there's no need to be so serious. The boy was cut off with a shot to the gut. You! Asahi loomed over Izuku like an angry dragon, ready to kill at the slightest disturbance. Explain yourself, now. Although she was over half a foot smaller than him, the boy was still quivering from fear. It's just SSS6 sense, Asahi. Izuku swallowed heavily, sweat pouring off his brow. CC can't CC control it. The boy wanted to die, from embarrassment and fear, he didn't know which. Settle down, children. Aizawa cut the confrontation short. We have wasted enough time already. You will be doing a series of physical tests, much like the ones you did in middle school, but this time you will be using your quirks. The Ministry of Education is furthering the fantasy that everyone is equal, but they aren't. This test will help me gauge your abilities with your quirk. Tossing Bakugu a softball, ordered him to the circle. You ranked first on the entrance exam. Use your quirk however you want as long as you don't leave the circle. Bakugu had a villainous smirk as he pegged back his arm and swung forwards, unleashing a large explosion propelling the ball even further as a result. Die! He hollered as he launched the ball. The machine in Aizawa's hand took a few seconds to calculate until it finally announced the result. 905.2 meters. The small machine said, causing many in the crowd to sputter in awe. This is going to be fun. Some unlucky soul said, causing Aizawa to promptly stomp out any joy. Fun, huh? Then let's add a challenge. Whoever comes last place will be expelled immediately. He said with a cold stare, silencing the class. That's not fair. We worked hard to get here. Mina shouted out definitely at Aizawa. Do you what else is unfair? Natural disasters, villain attacks, and crime. It's our job as heroes to combat this unfairness. Izuku's mind flashed back to the Sludge incident. Welcome to, let's get started, Aizawa said with a terrifying grin. 50-meter dash. Izuku watched as the different participants went up to run, thinking about the best quirk combination to gain the lowest possible time. He watched Asahi and a frog-like girl race, the girl hopping all the way along in 4.58 seconds. Asahi used a similar approach, bouncing off bouncy ball about the size of basketballs and getting a time of 5.34 seconds. The fastest by far was Ida, who achieved an impressive score of 2.04 seconds, Bakuga being second with a score of 3. Next up was Izuku and Yaoyorozu. Getting into a running stance, he activated Gear 5 to boost his speed. Over the break, the boy had managed to unlock the next level of gear shift. As Mr. Aizawa told them to begin, Izuku shot out 4 black hands and used them to slingshot himself, gaining even more velocity. He shot past the sensor, getting a time of 4.38 seconds, having to slow himself by firing slime out of his arms to create a sort of cushion. A moment later, Yaoyorozu passed the finish line using some rocket-propelled roller skates. The machine called out her time of 5.70 seconds. Luckily, it seemed only Yaoyorozu and Kaminari saw Izuku's use of slime, as he had made sure to quickly dissolve the substance to try and keep attention off of him. Walking back to the group, Izuku tried to keep himself away from the two in case they asked any questions. The group then moved on to the next exercise. Grip strength test. Although he used gear shift, kinetic store, black hand, hardening, slimokinesis, and buff up's extra strength boost all in tandem, he still only reached 467 kilograms on the handheld grip device, which is quite impressive, but compared to a large boy with 6 arms getting 783 kilograms and Yaoyorozu maxing it out using a hydraulic press isn't very much at all. Though he did get a few eyebrow raises from some of his classmates. Standing long jump. The standing long jump seemed to be where a lot of the class flourished. Bakugo flew across using his explosions, and Asahi used a very bouncy ball to almost clear the box. The frog girl just leaped the whole box. Heck, even Ida, whose quirk focused on ground movement, still managed to fly over half the box by using the engines on his calves. Izuku couldn't think of a way to fully leap across the gap without a running jump. Sure, he could get pretty far using Gear 5 and Kinetic Store, but he had already used a lot of energy using Gear 5 in the other activities. Izuku swallowed thickly as he was called up to the line. He activated Kinetic Stockpile and Gear 2 to at least have a slight boost in velocity. Bending down, the boy waited for Aizawa's signal, "Go!" Izuku leapt off of the spot, reaching around 6 meters before he began rapidly to lose speed. In the end, he only managed to make it less than half the box, one of the lowest in the class. Repeated side steps. Izuku had tried to use Gear 3 for this, but it seemed that it was far too fast for him to control at this point, as he just ended up falling over, which lowered his overall score on the test. More and more of the boys' classmates were getting suspicious of the boy's quirk. At first, it could have easily been played off as Black Hand, but since he managed to jump over 9 meters without using it, he was getting some questionable looks. At least Ijiro and Ishido were cheering him on. Asahi still seemed miffed over the Sixth Sense situation. Softball throw. The softball throw was also an area where many quirks prospered. As we know, Bakugo scored over 900 m, but others found this task the easiest. Ida had managed to dropkick the ball to 455 m, Ijiro punched the ball to 363 m, and Uraraka managed to get infinity. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. Okay, if I use Gear 2 and Kinetic Store, I should manage to get the ball just over 320 m, though it will look suspicious. Izuku readied his quirks. The boy pet his arm back and flung his arm forward. Izuku then watched as the ball flew forward at a normal speed and landed pathetically in front of him. 89 meters. The robotic voice said, as if mocking him. What happened? I had my quirks readied and everything. The boy mumbled to himself. He then realized his sixth sense was gone. I have erased your quirk. Mr. Aizawa said, his hair and scarf floating, revealing his yellow goggles hidden beneath. It is illogical to hold back during a test, so why do you? Are you scared of something? The man questioned. Izuku soon felt his second sight return to him as Aizawa sighed. I am giving you another throw, but if you don't give it your all, I will expel you immediately. This caused the boy to straighten up immediately. He had worked too hard to allow this chance to escape him. Catching another ball from his teacher, Izuku began to brainstorm ideas. Not caring if his classmates saw his quirk, he just needed to get a high score. After thinking of a plan, the boy placed the softball on the floor. Looks like Dorobo has given up. I knew he was useless. Bakugo laughed. Izuku then used an unpowered stomp to make the ball float around waist height. He shot Black Hand out and activated Gear 5 on both himself and the ball. Izuku then used Enhancement 2.04x and wrapped his feet in slime to keep himself from falling out of the circle. He then began to spin. He had gotten to the point of being like a black and green tornado, but it wasn't enough for the boy. He needed more. Faster, faster. I need to go faster. He thought to himself as he began to amplify gear shift using Kinetic Store. Izuku, you need to slow down. Nana spoke to him. You might hurt yourself. Her words made no difference to the boy as he kept going. Once the boy had maxed out at Gear 15, he oriented himself using Sixth Sense and released the ball. This caused a giant shock wave through the air. The wind pressure created blowing back a few of his classmates. Releasing all of his quirks, the boy slumped to the floor, passing out. Aizawa just stood there in shock, as did the rest of the students. This boy, who had been doing below average on the test so far, had just output so much energy he had shredded half of his shirt and launched a ball over 1.5 kilometers. Asahi, get him to Recovery Girl's office. Aizawa ordered the girl, who seemed a bit distracted. The rest of you will be completing the test, he said, watching Asahi struggle to move the larger boy with amusement. After 20 minutes of dragging the large hunk of a 15-year-old, she finally made it to the nurse's office. Seriously, why did Mr. Aizawa pick me of all people? The girl thought to herself. Oh, dearie, let me help you get him. An old voice spoke out to the girl as two robots came over and plucked Izuku from the small girl's grasp. A dislocated shoulder and signs of severe quirk strain. What has Shota got you children doing? The woman chided. Well, we are doing a quirk apprehension test, and he said to Midoriya if he didn't try his best he would expel him immediately, Asahi answered, not realizing it was a rhetorical question. Thank you, dear. Tell your teacher that if there are any more of his children here today, I will be having words with the rodent. She directed with a dangerous glint in her eyes. Now you hurry back to your lesson, she said with a wave. Asahi sneaked one more peek at the boy's muscles before closing the door and walking back to her homeroom. Although she would never admit it, she enjoyed the feeling of Izuku's body against hers as she carried him, even if he weighed 200 pounds. Sliding open the door, she caught the brunt end of what seemed to be an interrogation. Tell us what his quirk is. I'm so curious, Kaminari demanded, shining a spotlight in Kirishima's face. Never. It would be unmanly of me to do so. Kirishima stayed strong, not breaking to the torture. Please. We really want to know. An invisible girl, which Asahi had learnt was called Toru Hagakure, pleaded with the redhead. Just then the door opened to show a tired Izuku trying to sneak into the room, unsuccessfully as everyone turned to look at him. His arm was in a sling and he had bags under his eyes from how tired he was. Izubro, are you hurt? Is there anything I can help you with? Ijiro broke out of his restraints with the power of friendship and helped his friend collect his things. Excuse me, Midoriya, but is it okay if I walk with you and Kirishima? Yaoyorozu politely asked the duo. Yeah, me too, Kaminari said, throwing an arm around Izuku's shoulder, almost causing the boy to collapse from the strain on his body. Yeah, you can as long as you don't do that again. He is suffering from quirk strain, so he's very weak, she said, protectively putting herself between the two boys. Who said you were invited? Ijiro said, glaring at the pink-haired girl, tension building as she returned the glare. What's up with those two? Kaminari whispered to Izuku as the other two bickered and Yaoyorozu just awkwardly smiled. Izuku turned to the yellow-haired boy with a delirious look on his face. He doesn't like her because she shot me, he explained, too tired to be nervous. Here's the scar, pretty cool, right? He said, pulling his shirt open to show the crack-like scars. Izuku, don't undress around that seductress, he scolded the boy, quickly buttoning his shirt back up to hide the flesh. Seductress, Asahi shouted, practically glowing with how red she was. How dare you? The group continued to walk towards the train station, idly chatting about their thoughts on their teacher and how they found the test. After a while they noticed Izuku was lagging behind significantly, so Ijiro just opted to give him a piggyback. Soon the subject of conversation moved on to quirks. Hey Midoriya, your quirk seemed very strange when you showed it during the quirk test. So, if you don't mind, what is your quirk? Yaoyorozu innocently asked, trying not to overstep any boundaries. Ijiro and Saki immediately gave her looks telling her to back away from the subject, but it was already too late. Izuku was already answering. Oh, that's because I have more than one quirk, Izuku obliviously said, most likely due to having no energy to think properly. Yeah, I see. Yaoyorozu paused. She hadn't expected this answer. You have two quirks, that makes much more sense now. She partially lied. Nope. I have 13. He corrected her, getting an explosive reaction from half the group. What the hell? How do you have so many? Kaminari shouted, attracting the attention of some bystanders. Even Yaoyorozu's polite mask cracked from the information. Could you please elaborate? She asked, hoping to get an explanation. Oh well, my original quirk allows me to permanently copy someone else's quirk if I consume some of their DNA. He was once again oblivious to the looks he was getting from his two newest friends. Still, that situation doesn't happen very often. Most people would be surprised to get two. Who were they from? Yaoyorozu was really on a roll asking all of these questions. Well, I got one from a villain, one from a hero, one from a doctor, one from my mom, one from Ijiro, one from Saki, and 6 from a cup in a cafe. He said, accidentally using Asahi's first name, causing her to become a flustered mess. Wait, how did you ingest DNA from Asahi? He said, a teasing tone in his voice and a grin on his face. Oh well, you see Asahi began, already red from her previous freakout. She was swiftly cut off by Izuku, who said exactly what happened. I ate her hair. This caused the group to burst out with laughter, at the duo's expense of course. After the group disbanded to go their separate routes home, it was left up to Asahi to get the green bean home safely, seeing as she was the only one who knew where he lived. After an hour and a half of trying to move the behemoth of a boy, she finally made it to his front door, granted the sun was almost completely set. Knocking on the door, a sound of crashing was heard as a worried mother ran to the door. Izuku, what took you so long to get home? Inko's distaste for the girl was apparent as soon as she saw her. Why are you with Izuku so late? She asked with a stern edge to her voice. Oh, he overused his quirks today and it totally tired him out. I was the one tasked with getting him home, I'll be on my way now. She quickly explained to not give her the wrong idea. Hold on there, Inko said, pulling Asahi into the home. I may not like you, but I still won't let you go out alone at night. Way to be subtle about it, Asahi sarcastically thought to herself. Message your parents, you're sleeping here tonight. This threw Asahi for a loop. And no, I couldn't possibly dash. The girl was shut down by Inko, who just shushed her. Nonsense, you can sleep in Izuku's room and he will sleep on the couch, she nonchalantly said. Me? In his bed? Asahi had almost fainted at even the thought of it. Well, it's happening. I'll find you one of his t-shirts for you to wear since mine will be too big for you, but not big enough to fully cover you. Inko casually dumped her som onto the sofa and went on a hunt for a shirt. Asahi just looked around the small apartment, looking for anything to put her off of her current situation. I found one. Inko's tune had completely changed in the past 10 minutes and Asahi didn't know if it was better than before. Well, I'm going to bed since I have an early shift tomorrow, but you can entertain yourself with the TV or something. Good night. The girl just stood there stunned. What just happened? She asked no one in particular. Quirk Glossary. Inheritance, fused with Quirk Viewer, Gearshift, Gear 7. Slime Okinesis, Float Impact. Kinetic Stockpile, 2.12x, 6th sense, 50 meters. Orbit, Smoke. Hardening 43%, Black Hand. Skin Shot Big Guns. Chapter 7. Battle Trial. Izuku bolted up from his slumber, rolling off the couch and hitting the floor with a loud thump. Ow! He said, rubbing his head. Why am I on the couch? Izuku stood up and walked to take a shower. His sixth sense was still booting up for the day. Izuku savored the calm of not knowing what his downstairs neighbors were doing at 6 in the morning. The boy shivered at the memory. The boy swung open the bathroom door groggily and began brushing his teeth. Unfortunately, Izuku's lack of attention had caused him to walk into quite a predicament. As he was spitting his toothpaste into the sink, sixth sense managed to fully kick in, giving him around a second to move out of the way of the projectile that an embarrassed Asahi shot towards him. Due to utter exhaustion, Izuku didn't have enough time to react and was sent flying by marble to the chest. Get out of here, you pervert! She shouted, slamming the door in his face. I didn't mean to. The boy weakly defended. He knew he should have heard the shower, but he was really tired. Maybe he should get an energy drink on the way to school. He walked into the kitchen and brewed himself some coffee. This would probably give him enough energy for the rest of the day. Over the past few months, he had begun to wake up feeling tired and sluggish. He didn't know why, but it had just started happening, possibly due to training. His mother had noticed this and decided to teach him how to make coffee, to give him some extra energy for the day. Asahi walked into the room, not making any eye contact with the boy. Do you want some coffee? He asked, getting a disgusted look from the girl. No. You walk in on me showering and the apology I get is bean juice. She said with the same disgusted look as she had before. How can you look at yourself in the mirror? The girl spoke to him as if he was the scum of the earth. I'm gonna take a shower, you can just find yourself something to eat. Izuku's sweat dropped and hastily exited the room, hopping into the shower to wash off all of the previous day's grime and muck. Come on Asahi, I said I was sorry. Izuku pleaded with the girl, who seemed to think of him as a dirty pervert now. The two walked into Class 1A as they spoke. The green-haired boy tried to give little notice to most of the heads snapping towards him as soon as he walked through the door. I'm just saying man, she said shrugging her shoulders. The fiasco about 6th Sense yesterday and the situation this morning, I might start believing you are a pervert. She exclaimed far too loud for Izuku's liking. But in all seriousness, if you do that type of thing again, I will put a marble through your skull. She then trotted away to her desk like she hadn't just threatened the boy's life. Good morning Midoriya. How have you rested? You seemed quite tired yesterday. Yaoyorozu pleasantly greeted him. Oh, gee good morning Yaoyorozu, I slept quite well thank you. He squeaked, not yet used to the girl's caring nature. You can call me Momo you know, I don't mind. I know my surname is a bit of a mouthful. She chuckled. Okay. Izuku was cut off by Asahi, who managed to move at light speed to her friends' desks. Oh, are we sharing our first name? You can call me Saki then Izuku. The girl's grip on his shoulder was possibly enough to fracture it if he wasn't careful. I thought you were mad at me, Saki, he said with far too much sass from someone in his situation should. Well, I got over it, Izuku. Her grip tightened even further on his shoulder, causing him to wince. Momo cleared her throat to get the two's attention, who seemed to be passively aggressively arguing. Well anyway Midoriya, I would like to ask you about your quirk. What manifestations does it have? The girl hoped that her consideration didn't go to waste. Izuku just looked confused. After a few seconds of silence, Asahi whispered something in his ear and slithered away back to her seat. Oh, my quirk's manifestations. Well, I actually have a notebook to list the manifestations. Izuku almost slipped up but managed to save the cover. Izuku showed Yaoyorozu his different quirks and explained them to her in as much detail as possible. It was the first time he had ever really had someone to geek out over quirks with. The girl seemed to be absorbing all of this information with ease, even stopping him at certain points to finish reading the contents of the entire page. Midoriya, I have seen this phrase quite often scribbled in your notes on your quirks, but there isn't much detail on exactly what it is. The girl said looking up at the boy. Oh yeah, ask away. Izuku was getting too caught up in the quirk sharing he forgot something about the journal. It was his private one. What's one for all? The question was like a punch to the gut for the boy. How could he have let such an important piece of information slip? WWLU. SSSC. The boy didn't have any idea of what to say. If he told the truth then he could be putting her in danger. Mr. Yagi had made that very clear, but if he lied she would surely be able to tell. Right? It's the name of what I hold my quirks. He was quite proud of this lie. He was definitely getting better. Really? She didn't seem fully convinced yet. It looks like she managed to see through the boy's expert lying. Why yeah? It's just saying quirk collection would get super tiring. So I shortened it. She definitely wasn't buying it, but she seemed to sense that he didn't want to talk about it and dropped the subject. The boy turned back around as Sementosa walked into the room to teach them literature. Good save Izuku, Nana sarcastically commented, causing a tick to appear on his head. If Mr. Yagi spent 40 years dealing with these guys, no wonder he had the patience of a saint. Izuku pulled his textbook out while Sementos introduced himself to the class and explained the subjects they would be covering this year. He wondered what foundational hero studies would be like and who his teacher would be. He knew Mr. Yagi had been hired at the start of the school year, but he had been put with the third-year hero students, apparently because they needed more combat experience before going out into the field. They were the next batch of heroes and had far less time left to train up than he and the first years did. He hated the fact that it was a good point. He wanted to be taught by All Might, damn it. Izuku focused back on the lesson. He didn't want to miss out on anything Sementos or Mr. Ishiyama had to say. Lunch hall. After getting through the first 3 lessons of the day, Class 1A traveled down to the lunch hall to get their lunch. Surprisingly, the food had been crafted by the one and only cook hero, Lunch Rush, meaning it was possibly one of the most delicious meals that the group would ever have. The majority of the class had ended up sitting together, but Kogu had gone to sit alone and Saki had gone to try and communicate with the other hero course class. The boy had so far been able to keep a low profile among the class chatter, possibly due to him being near the end of the row and being hidden by the massive frame of Mizo Shoji. But this piece must come to an end eventually as the topic of conversation moved on to quirks. Izuku knew he was going to be mentioned at some point and began formulating an explanation of his quirk. "So, Midoriya, what's up with your quirk?" she innocently asked in a sing-song tone. "Yeah, yesterday in the test it looked like you had two." Zero chuckled. If only he knew how many more he really had. "WLYCDish," Izuku began to explain until he was cut off by a shout. "You're the one with the copying quirk." A blonde-haired boy bellowed at the top of his lungs while pointing at him. Was he trying to tell the whole school? Izuku turned bright red from all of the eyes on him at once as the hall went deadly silent. He was cut off once again as the boy dragged him away. "Give us back our Izuku." He heard Ijiro roar after the boy before he got too far away to hear Class 1A over the chatter of the other students. Where are you taking me?" Izuku shyly asked the blonde, who seemed to have stars in his eyes. "To a better class than your old one," he said, still dragging Izuku along. As he neared another table, he noticed a pretty girl with pink hair that he recognized. "Saki?" he asked as he was forcefully made to sit at the table his kidnapper had brought him to. "Asahi, is this guy the one you won't stop talking about?" the blonde asked, "the one who can also copy quirks." Asahi seemed to turn atomic red at this statement, choking on her drink. I wasn't constantly talking about him," she shouted in her defense, not seeming to convince the rest of the group. "And yeah, that's him," she squeaked quietly, her blush only glowing brighter, to which a group of girls squealed and began talking about things foreign to a dense boy such as Izuku. As they did that, the boys fussed over the green-haired boy. What a coincidence that two people with copy quirks made it into UA in the same year. Only about 2% of the population are born with them. A boy with silver hair and long eyelashes said, "All right, Midoriya." How did he know his name? "I'm Nito Minoma, my quirk is called copy." "What's yours?" Minoma fanboyed over Izuku like he was a celebrity, which he definitely was not. "And my quirk is called inheritance, it allows me to partially copy quirks." He was still nervous about these new people. "Wow. How long is your time limit?" "Not to show off, but mine is 10 minutes. How do you activate it?" "I need to touch someone to activate mine." Izuku was pummeled with questions from the boy. "To activate mine I need to consume some of the target's DNA, and I don't have a time limit, I permanently copy quirks." This seemed to destroy Minoma's self-image, clearly shattering his self-esteem from how superior Izuku's quirk was. "I see. I apologize for thinking of your quirk as less than mine, sensei," he said, bowing his head in apology to the superior copier. "Echa, sensei?" Izuku was shocked by the boy's 180 in attitude and the new title he had claimed. "Why, you don't have to call me sensei. My real name is fine." Izuku sputtered while waving his arms around in front of him. Suddenly he was grabbed from behind and dragged away from the group, for the second time today. "Come on, Izuku. We are going to class," Asahi unexpectedly blurted while speed walking away from the table for some odd reason. The girl with green hair like himself was dying from laughter, and the other girls seemed to also be very amused, grinning from ear to ear. "But I haven't had any food," Izuku whined, only annoying the girl even more. "I will buy you a Snickers," the girl shouted as they left the hall. "Oh, what a happy couple," one of the girls mocked. "Hello, welcome to your first Foundational Hero Studies class," Aizawa said flatly. "Your teacher will be arriving shortly, just sit tight." The group began murmuring about their new teacher and who it might be. Izuku just happily munched away at his Snickers bar, courtesy of Saki. Midoriya, if you don't mind me asking, why are you eating a Snickers?" Momo asked the greenette, confusion clear on her face. "Oh well, Saki dragged me out of lunch before it had ended, so she said she would buy me a Snickers," Izuku explained. "I'm a bit concerned. When we left, Saki was really red and the girls were laughing at her. She was super aggravated. Do you think she is getting bullied? Izuku leaned in to say this part, not wanting to alert Saki that he was talking about her. Oh! Momo had finally realized something about the boy she hadn't seen before. Izuku may have been really smart, but he was super dense. And no, I don't think she is getting bullied, I think she's getting teased. She purposely left out the part about it being because of him. Really? Huh, girls are weird, he said, finishing off his Snickers. The class was silenced when they heard the clacking of shoes echo through the corridor. The suspense in the room was suffocating. The students watched the door eagerly. Their bets on which teacher they got had been a bit too intense, and some people had upwards of 40,000 yen on the line. The door slid open as a woman with dark hair and fair skin walked into the room. Kaminari seemed to be very happy to see her. Well, you must be 1A. She said to the class boisterously. I'm your foundational hero studies teacher, the 18+ hero, Midnight. But you guys can call me Miss Kiyama. The hero finished with a wink, not the sort of thing a teacher should do to their students. Flashy as always, Aizawa mumbled under his breath. Well, I'll be leaving now, make sure to not let them get too hurt. He remarked as he left the classroom. I already know your names and quirks, so I don't need to embarrass you with introductions. She continued as if Aizawa hadn't even been there. Today we will be doing 2v2 battles to help me gauge your cooperation and combat skills so I can help you individually grow. She explained to the group of students, who were eating up all of the information. But first, you need to look the part. Midnight then pressed a button under the desk, causing the wall to split into segments filled with cases with numbers that corresponded with the desks. Go put these on and meet me at training site Gamma. The mob of children rushed towards their cases. Although Izuku was caught by the collar before he escaped the room. Midoriya, a word please. The tall woman said as she dragged him back. Why yes, Miss Kiyama? He asked. He hadn't even done anything and was already pulled away. I have read your file and I must say, you have an interesting quirk. So I want to make an offer, she told the boy, plucking a hair from her head. I want you to have my quirk, or at least as close to it as your quirk can get. Shoving the hair into his face, eat this. W.I.? It's why yours. Izuku did think the quirk was amazing and he had 5 free quirk slots, but it felt rude to take a quirk without asking why. Well, isn't it obvious? I'm your hero teacher, I get paid specifically to make you the best hero possible, the woman joked, getting a snort out of Izuku. But seriously, I want you to have it because you have the potential to become the #1 hero, and I want to help you get there. Izuku accepted this answer and swallowed the hair. Now go get changed. Midnight ordered, rushing him out of the classroom. Training site Gamma. Midnight stood at the site entrance, waiting for her students to show up in their new gear. Well, it took you guys long enough. She shouted as she saw the group making their way towards the end of the tunnel. I feel like a mother watching her baby take its first steps. The woman pretended to wipe a tear from her eye. Their costumes came into full view of the teacher, and there was little to say. She was impressed. None of the previous year's students had designs as unique as theirs. Looks like we are missing someone. Kiyama had noticed her favorite green-haired boy wasn't there, possibly due to her. Sorry I'm late. He came running out in a black jumpsuit with a hood which had 2 rabbit-like ears pointing out of the top. He had a metal mask which covered his mouth and nose, and his suit had dark green accents on the sides. He was of course also wearing his iconic red shoes. Alright, let's get started. We will be doing indoor combat trials and deciding teams by lots. The woman pulled out a box of tickets. Ida raised his hand robotically. Miss Kiyama, don't you think it's a bit ineffective to draw lots? He asked. Well, usually in the field, heroes don't get to pick who they work with, it's just whoever is on the scene. Their teacher explained, surprisingly logically despite her personality. So who's going first? After everyone had picked their lots, it was revealed Izuku was with Shoji on Team C, the boy giving him a slight wave as he walked over to him. Next was deciding who would fight. First up was Team A, Yaoyorozu and Uraraka, as heroes versus Team E, Aoyama and Ishido as villains. This match ended quickly as Aoyama exhausted himself with 1 naval beam and Yaoyorozu caught Ishido in a net trap she made. The next match was Team D, Ida and Todoroki, as heroes versus Team J, Kirishima and Siro, as villains. Ijiro looked super pumped up but was encased in ice within 2 seconds of the match starting. Siro was only spared of this fate because he was hanging from the ceiling using his tape. Siro had tried to protect the bomb from Todoroki but hadn't seen Ida sneak by him and touch the faux explosive. Next up is Team A as the heroes. Miss Kayama announced, holding the piece of card up in the air. "Oh, it's Saki and Bakugo this round. I wonder how that will go?" Izuku sarcastically thought to himself, and Team C as the villains. Oh no! Izuku dared a glance towards his ex-childhood friend and Saki. Katsuki had a feral grin with murderous intent seeping from his form. As the duo walked into the building, the green-haired boy was pale, thinking about all of the horrific ways Bakugo would mutilate him. Shoji seemed to pick up on his nervous energy as he put a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay, Midoriya? You look ill," the behemoth asked Izuku. He nodded. "Why, I'm fine, Jay, just a little nervous." The boy lied. "Alright then, we need a plan. My quirk allows me to duplicate any part of my body onto these tentacles," Shoji stated, waving his extra appendages. "I understand that you have a copying quirk, but that is the limit of my knowledge. Would you mind cluing me in?" Izuku proceeded to explain all of his quirks as briefly as he possibly could, seeing as they only had 5 minutes of prep time. "I see, then could you add my quirk to your arsenal? It may prove useful for us to both have it during this lesson," he said as he plucked a hair from his head and gave it to Izuku, who swallowed it without a second thought. From the number of quirks he had absorbed over the past year, the stamina drain had been reduced significantly from his first time, where he had passed out instantly. Quirk, Black Body. A fusion of the Quirk Dupliarms and the Quirk Black Hand has given you the ability to create tendrils much like Black Hands, the difference being you can create any body part at the end of them. These extra parts function exactly as a real one would. Eyes give you extra sight, ears give you more hearing, etc. You can increase these effects by stacking the tendrils you use. Your current maximum distance is 100 meters. Fusion of Quirk, Dupliarms and Quirk, Black Hand, Emitter type quirk. So for the plan, I think I should use Black Body to create mouths to send Saki and Bakugo on a wild goose chase around the building to try and avert them away from the bomb while you try to go and capture them. I've faith that you can easily overpower Saki and Bakugo will most likely ignore you to try and fight me." Izuku paused for a breath. "If you manage to keep Saki's arms and feet from aiming, you have practically defeated her, and if you have to fight Bakugo, then I will come down and assist." Izuku stomped the floor, causing the bomb to float up to the ceiling. He then used Black Body to mover the bomb over the doorway. "If they are just glancing into the rooms to look for the bombs, then we can win if they can't spot the bomb." Shoji just stared at the boy, shocked. Izuku had managed to formulate a plan with minimal confrontation and had discerned one of their opponent's weaknesses. "Villains, your preparation time is up. The heroes are entering now," Midnight announced through the boy's earpieces. Izuku immediately sensed the hero team enter the building and shot out his Black Body mouths and signaled Shoji to go capture Saki. "She is to the left of the entrance, moving up the stairs," he informed Shoji as he kept Katsuki busy on the first floor. The bomb was hidden on the 5th floor and Izuku was on the 4th floor to further misdirect the hero team if they managed to find him. "I've captured Asahi, but she managed to injure a few of my arms and my leg. Also, I think Bakugo has discovered my location." Izuku heard a distant blast as Bakugo rounded the corner where Shoji was. Izuku watched in horror as Bakugo unleashed a flurry of explosions on the boy, sensing all of the blood coming from him. Activating Gear 5, the green-haired boy sprinted to his teammate's location on the 2nd floor. He sensed Bakugo hide from him as he reached the scene. Izuku had watched the incident happen, but it was far more gruesome to see it in person. Shoji was slumped against the wall with blood leaking from his face. Multiple of his bones were sticking out of his flesh and his right leg was bent the wrong way. "So you've seen my handiwork." Bakugo chuckled as he strode from his hiding spot. Izuku didn't bother to look at him. "I would say I went overboard, but..." A heinous grin spread across the boy's face. The monster had it coming. "I mean, look at him. Better off a villain than a hero." Izuku felt rage overwhelm him, Bakugo had gone too far calling Shoji a monster. He knew Bakugo had quirkist beliefs, him being a victim of it in the past, but he hadn't known about his prejudice against those with mutation quirks also. Izuku felt a stirring inside himself as Daigoro called out to him, "Calm down, kid. Your quirk is reacting and we don't know what will happen if you get any angrier." His warning had fallen on deaf ears however. Izuku began to use his quirk to discreetly attack Baku. He looked over his shoulder to glare at the boy, "And you want to become a hero?" Bakugo was taken aback. He had never seen Izuku speak with such evident hatred before. He quickly steeled himself, but something else was bothering him about the boy. His eyes were very dimly glowing. If you weren't looking for it you probably wouldn't even see it, but these eyes pierced Katsuki's soul as if they were knives. Izuku stood to face Bakugo, allowing multiple black tendrils to shoot out of his back. Bakugo's grin returned as he flung his arms back and blasted forward using a dual explosion. "I'm gonna kill you, Dorobo," he screamed. Izuku charged up Gear 4 and Kinetic Store, using them to launch himself towards Bakugo. From what he could see the blonde would be starting with his signature right hook. Moving up to Gear 5, the greenette sidestepped Katsuki's attack and wrapped a tendril around his arm, using it to smash him into a wall and activate Gear 5 on the boy. Bakugo hit the wall at an incredible speed, a web of cracks spreading from his impact. Pulling himself out of the wall, the blonde once again rocketed towards Izuku using the speed increase of Gear. Thinking fast, Izuku cancelled the quirk's effect on Bakugo, who was unprepared for the shift and plummeted into the floor. "I just need to outrun him," Izuku thought, amping up to Gear 7 and flying away from his opponent. Checking his watch, Izuku noted that he had 3 minutes left of the exercise. Sensing Bakugo, the boy darted up the nearest set of stairs, seeing Katsuki jump out from around the corner. While running through the halls, Izuku found himself running out of steam and thus lowered his output of Gear Shift to just Gear 2. Izuku felt the floor crumbling underneath him as Bakugo destroyed the floor using a large blast. "I've been saving this attack just for you, Dorobo." Bakugo howled with menacing laughter as he pulled a pin on his grenade gauntlet, releasing an explosion so large Izuku had not time to react apart from hardening the part of him facing the blast. "Bakugo, no!" He heard Kiyama screech through his earpiece. Surprisingly, he survived the blast, but the hardened parts of his skin had large cracks through them, like glass that had been dropped. His costume hadn't had the same fate however. The majority of it had burned off, and only parts of his breathes remained. Almost the whole wall behind him had been atomized. "In it, Dorobo, you just have to ruin all of my plans." The blonde growled, preparing to unleash another ginormous explosion before he began to slowly sway and fell to the ground, nausea attacking him. What the hell is this?" he croaked before vomiting on the floor. "It's the side effects of nitrous oxide, laughing gas," Izuku explained as he walked towards Bakugo. "I drugged you with it when you were talking earlier using my quirk." "Villain team wins," Kiyama announced through their earphones. "Quirk Emission allows the user to emit any gas they want along as the elements necessary are in their body. The user can only emit as much as the amount in their body. Mutation of quirk, somnambulist, emitter type quirk. Quirk glossary. Inheritance, fused with quirk viewer, gear shift, Gear 7, emission. Slime okinesis, float impact. Kinetic stockpile, 2.63x, 6th sense, 50 meters. Orbit, smoke. Hardening 43%, black body. Skin shot big guns.